Deputy Majority Leader Janet Garin, Deputy Majority Leader Alfred de los Santos, Deputy Majority Leader David J.J. Suarez, Vice Chairpersons Claudie Bautista, Vice Chair Fernando Cabredo, Vice Chair Luis Campos Jr., Vice Chair Luis Lorena Cuaresma, Vice Chair Faustino Inodi, Vice Chair Ana Marie Villaraza Suarez, Vice Chair Eric Goyap. We have also Representative Alfelito Bascog, Representative Faustino Michael Carlos D. III, Representative Nicolas Enciso III, Representative Antonieta Yodela, Representative Carmelo John Lasatin II, Representative Maria Janina Catherine Agarao, Representative Eleanor Bulot Begtang, Representative Edward Hagedorn, Representative Ruth Mariano Hernandez, Representative Muhammad Paglas, Representative Florida Rida Robes, Representative Lorna Silverio, Representative Steve Chongbian Solon, Representative Emilio Tanwatco III, and Ana Victoria Veloso Tuason. And from the Department of Foreign Affairs, may we acknowledge Secretary Enrique Manalo, Undersecretary Antonio Morales, Undersecretary Maria Teresa Lazaro, Acting Undersecretary Jesus Domingo, Acting Undersecretary Jose Eduardo de Vega, Assistant Secretary Grace Cruz Pavella, Assistant Secretary Raul Hernandez, Assistant Secretary Henry Bensurto Jr., Assistant Secretary Maria Angela Ponce, Assistant Secretary Kira Azucena, Assistant Secretary Domingo Nolasco, Assistant Secretary Beth De Apera, Deputy Assistant General Secretary Mark Hamoy, and Director General Jose Maria Carino. That's all, Madam Chair.
Salamat, Comsec. To my colleagues, Secretary Enrique Manalo, DFA family, ladies and gentlemen, magandang hapon po sa lahat, and welcome to this budget briefing. Of course, we all look forward to listening to your budget proposal and plans and programs for 2023. And if we may recall, at the height of the pandemic, DFA played a crucial role in making sure that the 461,263 OFWs, ang ating mga bagong bayani, who lost their jobs would be able to come home to their families safe and sound. Apart from promoting OFW welfare, we commend the efforts of the department in protecting our national interests and fostering strong relations with countries around the world. You have led our country to commit to the 2030 SDGs and to cooperate with foreign nations to address global challenges like pandemics in regional groupings such as Asean. Salamat po for a job well done. Congress is one with you in upholding an independent foreign policy while strengthening bilateral and multilateral ties with various countries to maintain viable partnerships in areas of investment, trade, infrastructure, human security, and defense. We will see to it that DFA will be sufficiently funded to effectively perform its duties so that the Philippines will remain a friend to all and an enemy to none. Maraming salamat po. And at this point, I would like to introduce to you the lead sponsor of the DFA budget. It's Representative Joseph Dialago. And with him, he has two co-sponsors who are not with us today, but they are Representative Benny Abante and Representative Arnie Buentabella. So sila po ang mga general ninyo sa magiging giyera ninyo sa plenaryo pagdating ng linggo ng September 21. So if there's anyone that you obviously need to clarify on budget concerns, sila po yan. So at this point, we would like to request Representative Dialago to give his sponsorship statement.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and to all members of the family of DFA, headed by our Secretary Enrique Manalo, and all the other secretaries and assistant secretaries. Magandang hapon po sa ating lahat. No? A while ago, it is the first time na nakita po tayo, and it seems to me na medyo malaki daw ang problema ng ating budget because the budget cut. But siguro with the help of the members of the committee in appropriation, hopefully yung budget na requirement niyo may balik namin doon sa dapat na budget so that you can really perform yung expected performance sa inyo, especially next year wherein sabi nga mag-open up na yung ating bansa to other countries. So may I ask for our good secretary if he has something on opening statement.
Rep. Ilago, perhaps Secretary Enrique Manalo may just proceed with his presentation in the interest of time.
Good afternoon, Honorable Stella Luz A. Kimbo, the Senior Vice Chairperson, Honorable Joseph Gilbert A. Bialago, Vice Chairperson, other members and representatives of the Committee on Appropriations, and honorable members of the committee, good afternoon. It's my great privilege to be here to present the proposed budget for 2023 of the Department of Foreign Affairs. And I will be presenting some slides while I speak. The Department of Foreign Affairs is run by 227 officers and 676 regular staff stationed in the headquarters in Manila. It's 36 consular offices across the country and 94 foreign service posts. The men and women of the DFA subscribe to the highest standards of integrity, competence, and professionalism as they fulfill day to day the mandate given to them to uphold the country's sovereignty, territorial integrity, contribute to nation-building efforts, protect Filipinos abroad, and enhance the country's standing in the international community by forging cordial and productive relations with bilateral and other partners. The DFA continued delivering on this mandate even during the pandemic. Despite or because of the restrictions on travel and face-to-face interactions, the DFA intensified its efforts to fulfill its duty, which required creativity and novel approaches. As we finally start to emerge from the fog of the pandemic, activity in foreign relations has shifted to a higher gear beginning this year. The DFA therefore has embarked on a catch-up mode to make up for lost time and temporary setbacks, building upon innovations it set up in the interim. The proposed budget reflects the work that the DFA has embarked upon and would like to continue in the coming year. Mr. Chair, the DFA proposes a budget of 20.304 billion pesos for next year. This amount is approximately 2.5% less than this year's budget of 21.051 billion pesos and represents a mere 0.39% of the proposed national budget for 2023. I wish to note that in 2020, the year when the pandemic started, the DFA returned over a third of its budget for that year to the National Treasury. Since then, our budgets for the succeeding years, 2021 and 22, have decreased. However, this did not mean that our work has also decreased. On the contrary, we saw a sharp rise in demand for consular and assistance to national services in the same period. In addition, the department had to contend with new challenges brought about by the pandemic. Therefore, for the past 2.5 years, we had to do much more with less. The budget proposal of the DFA for 2023 will fund the operations of our home office, 94 foreign service posts, and 36 consular offices, which altogether serve 10.527 million overseas Filipinos in 195 countries and territories, and millions more here at home. Mr. Chair, more than 2 years into the pandemic, the DFA remains committed in fulfilling its mandate to uphold Philippine sovereignty and sovereign rights, contribute to national economic development, protect the rights and attend to the welfare of overseas Filipinos, promote Filipino culture, and enhance the nation's standing in the global community. Under the direction Under the direction of President Ferdinand Romualdez Marcos Jr., we will continue to pursue an independent foreign policy while maintaining good relations with our neighbors and international partners. As the President said in his first SONA, quote, "The Philippines shall continue to be a friend to all and enemy to none." The DFA shall faithfully carry out this marching order in all of its undertakings. Allow me now to update the Commission on Appropriations on the DFA's latest accomplishments. As a maritime nation, the Philippines recently commemorated the 6th anniversary of the award on the South China Sea arbitration. The award, an affirmation of UNCLOS's dispute resolution mechanism, conclusively settled the status of historic rights and maritime entitlements in the South China Sea. It declared as without legal effect claims that exceeded geographic and substantive limits of maritime entitlements under the UNCLOS, or the UN Convention on Law of the Sea. It upheld the Philippines' sovereign rights and jurisdiction in its exclusive economic zone. It not only sets reason and right in the South China Sea, but is an inspiration for how matters should be considered through reason and right by states facing similarly challenging circumstances. There is a growing list of countries that support the award. The milestone decision should serve as an inspiration for how disagreements and disputes should be resolved. This year also marks the 20th anniversary of the 2002 Declaration on the Conduct of Parties in the South China Sea, or the DOC. Let me reassure you that the Philippines, together with our ASEAN member states and China, continue to reaffirm our commitment to the full and effective implementation of the DOC. Several initiatives have been proposed to commemorate this occasion, which are still under review and consideration, including the proposed issuance of a joint statement on the 20th anniversary of the DOC as an outcome document of the 25th ASEAN-China Summit this November. The Philippines persistently urges all parties to exercise self-restraint, uphold international law, especially UNCLOS, and create a conducive environment for the ongoing Code of Conduct negotiations, while underscoring that 2 decades of the DOC implementation has not stopped coercive activities in the South China Sea. An effective and substantive COC remains our goal. In order to promote peace and stability in the region, the COC must uphold international law and the 2016 Arbitration Award. With regard to oil and gas cooperation in the West Philippine Sea, the DFA looks forward to working with the Department of Energy on future activities that will be anchored on the Philippine Constitution and with the national interest as the primordial consideration. The DFA has continued to advance the country's other priorities in ASEAN. At the recently concluded 55th ASEAN Foreign Ministers meeting, the DFA raised key concerns such as the aforementioned arbitral award and the importance of maritime cooperation. We actively engage in discussions on matters of great significance to ASEAN member states and its dialogue and external partners, namely issues on the South China Sea, the crisis in Myanmar, post-COVID-19 pandemic recovery, the ongoing conflict in the Ukraine, climate change, terrorism, and cybersecurity. The Philippines looks forward to the ASEAN chairmanship of Cambodia at the forthcoming ASEAN Summit in November this year, as we adopt the theme of, quote, ASEAN Act, addressing challenges together. In the United Nations, the DFA continues to advance Philippine interests. Recently, I headed the Philippine delegation in presenting the country's 3rd voluntary national review at the UN headquarters in New York, where I reported on the progress of the Philippine implementation of the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals, or SDGs, highlighting national policies and programs, especially in the context of the post-pandemic recovery. The key message of my presentation was that while the devastating effects of the pandemic set us back on some of our development goals, they also led to innovations that will help us get back on track. The DFA secured a seat for NAMRIA Deputy Administrator Efren P. Carandang in the UN Commission on the Limits of the Continental Shelf for a 5-year term beginning 2023 at the elections held last June in New York. The campaign took 2 years and was a coordinated effort of our missions to the UN and all of our embassies abroad. The CLCS is a body of the UNCLOS, tasked to consider and make recommendations to states on the outer limits of their continental shelves beyond 200 nautical miles from the baselines. It is of strategic importance to the Philippines because, if properly harnessed, it can contribute significantly to our goal of making the South China Sea a sea of peace, stability, and prosperity. The DFA also participated in the International Migration Review Forum, where we reported the country's accomplishments on the implementation of the Global Compact for Safe, Orderly, and Regular Migration, or GCM. We informed the forum of the enactment of Republic Act 11641, establishing the Department of Migrant Workers, making the Philippines the first country in the world to mandate the realization and objectives of the GCM. The DFA also highlighted the Philippine government's initiatives to protect migrant workers through its campaign to reform the kafala system, repatriation efforts, and assistance to stranded migrants and tourists at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. The Philippines consistently participates at the highest level possible in multilateral forums that deal with migration to bolster the universalization of the GCM, especially by migrant receiving countries, to ensure that Filipinos overseas are well protected. Mr. Chair, as we strengthen our familial ties with our Asean neighbors and UN family, we continue to reinforce and enhance our bilateral relations. These efforts continued and even intensified during the pandemic because we recognize that a renewed and re-energized relationship with our bilateral partners was essential if humanity were to recover from the crippling effects of the pandemic and overcome new and emerging threats to global stability. In the past year, we held political and economic consultations with the Philippines' bilateral partners. I wish to highlight several of these exchanges. Earlier this month, we welcomed the visit of U.S. Secretary of State, Antony Blinken. Secretary Blinken and I talked extensively about the deep, multifaceted alliance between our two countries. We also discussed the steps we can take to build on the two-way high-level engagements over the past year, including the 9th bilateral strategic dialogue last November 2021, where we adopted the joint vision for a 21st century Philippine-US partnership. We also touched on a wide range of issues and concerns, from strengthening our cooperation to better address current and emerging security threats and cross-cutting challenges in the post-pandemic world, and the readiness of the United States to work closely with the current administration while advancing our shared objective of promoting peace and prosperity in the region. I'd also like to report that the Philippines and the United States launched the inaugural Maritime Dialogue this April. This dialogue initiative will enable us to address cooperatively current security risks and shared maritime concerns, especially in the South China Sea. On July 6 this year, we welcomed a visit from China's State Consular and Foreign Minister Wang Yi, who was the first foreign minister received by the new Marcos administration. Foreign Minister Wang Yi and I agreed to shift bilateral relations to a higher gear by strengthening and expanding economic ties and reviving people-to-people exchanges as we move to a post-pandemic normal. We both acknowledge that the current maritime issues in the South China Sea should be addressed through diplomatic means and peaceful consultations, as well as negotiations on the COC. During Foreign Minister Wang Yi's visit, the Samal Island Davao City Connector Bridge Project, a key government-to-government cooperation project between the Philippines and China, was launched. Bolstering our bilateral relations with India, the Philippines welcomed a visit by Indian Minister of External Affairs, Jai Shankar, last February, which was followed by a visit to India by former Secretary Teodoro Locsin Jr. Matters pertaining to security, health, science, technology, and maritime cooperation were discussed. Building on these gains, both countries have agreed to upscale cooperation in agriculture, pharmaceuticals, science and technology, culture, education, tourism, defense, as well as other security-related matters. New areas of partnerships in financial technology, space cooperation, development cooperation, and renewable energy are also being explored. The Philippines also held a second maritime dialogue with Australia and agreed to strengthen cooperation on maritime issues, especially on fisheries, maritime domain awareness, environmental protection, defense, and maritime science. Maritime legal issues, especially in the South China Sea, were discussed, with both sides focused on strengthening cooperation in affirming the primacy of the UN Convention on Law of the Sea and the 2016 Arbitral Award in both multilateral fora and legal diplomacy. Mr. Chair, the Philippines, along with the rest of the world, is now on its way to recovering from the pandemic. Our economic recovery hinges on learning to live with and managing the effects of COVID-19 and its variants such that they no longer hamper efforts towards the goal of a secure and comfortable life for Filipinos. At the height of the pandemic, the DFA contributed to the national pandemic response by facilitating vaccine procurement and assisting our displaced Filipinos. Through the efforts of our foreign service posts, we acquired vaccines from Japan, China, United Arab Emirates, Australia, Russia, and the United States, among others, directly or through the COVAX facility. As of 15 August 2022, DFA has assisted in the facilitation of international humanitarian assistance from 19 foreign governments and 7 other entities thereof, 5 international organizations, and 49 private companies, groups, and individuals. It has assisted in obtaining flight clearances and in the issuance of visas to foreign technical experts involved in the COVID-19 related procurement of the Philippine Red Cross and to the Asian Development Bank grant to the DOH. The DFA also facilitated the processing of Japan's grant aid and loan assistance to support the Philippines' response to COVID-19. The current total monetary value of the international humanitarian assistance towards the country's pandemic response that the DFA has processed is approximately $23.5 million. The very first COVID-related repatriation was on 9 February 2020, when the DFA chartered a flight that brought home 30 overseas Filipinos from Wuhan, China. Since then, as of 26 August this year, DFA has facilitated the repatriation of 461,623 Filipinos who had to return home because of the pandemic. Land-based workers made up the majority of the repatriates, with 355,621, or 77%, coming from at least 90 countries around the world. The remaining repatriates of the 106,000, or 22.96%, were seafarers who were working in about 150 cruise ships, oil tankers, and other bulk vessels. The DFA has begun the work of preparing for the transition of its mandate regarding the protection of migrant workers to the Department of Migrant Workers, and we have almost daily engagements with the DMW in this regard. However, until the DMW is fully operational, the DFA shall continue to deliver assistance to nationals, or OTN, services through its foreign service posts and their attached agencies under the one country team approach. Recently, the DFA's Office of the Undersecretary for Migrant Workers, or UMWA, brought home 288 undocumented and distressed OFWs from Kuwait. With regard to the current situation in Sri Lanka, the DFA, through the Philippine Embassy in Dhaka, Bangladesh, has repatriated 44 Filipinos out of 114 who signified their intent to return. 70 overseas Filipinos are still awaiting the processing of necessary documents. From 19 to 21 August this year, the Philippines distributed $300 as financial assistance to each of the 500 Filipinos, some who stand to lose their jobs due to the economic crisis. DFA continues to closely monitor the developments in that country. From February to June 2022, the DFA assisted a total of 451 overseas Filipinos in the Ukraine. Out of this number, 397 have been repatriated to the Philippines, while the remaining 54 evacuated or fled to other European countries. Our UMA has coordinated with the repatriations with the Philippine embassies in Warsaw and Budapest, who in turn work with our honorary consuls under their respective jurisdictions. As of 26 August this year, DFA has utilized almost 526.26 million pesos of the 1 billion peso ATN fund. This translates to a 52.63% utilization rate. Some 44,938 overseas Filipinos benefited from the fund that covered repatriation, welfare, and medical assistance, shipment of remains, conduct of OFW conferences, maintenance of shelters, as well as administrative expenses of ATN offices. We have also disbursed 85.894 million pesos out of the 200 million peso legal assistance fund to 3,608 beneficiaries. Mr. Chair, our mandate to uphold our nation's standing in the global community, I'm pleased to share with the committee that the Philippines, for the 7th consecutive year, maintained its Tier 1 status in the U.S. State Department's Trafficking in Persons Report for 2022. This is a testament to the Philippines' commitment to the promotion and protection of human rights. The Philippines' ranking acknowledges our relentless and comprehensive efforts to prevent trafficking in persons, protect victims, and prosecute the perpetrators. We will continue our collaborative work with other IACAT member agencies, our partners in civil society, and the international community to enhance and improve policies, legislation, and mechanisms to further reduce and end trafficking in persons. Mr. Chair, the DFA continued to provide consular services even at the height of the pandemic. With the gradual loosening of the pandemic restrictions, we anticipate an increase in demand for services. This is evident in the numbers for the first half of 2022. 2,133,180 passports have been issued from January to June 2022, compared to 2,530,085 issued for the entirety of 2021. The same trend can be observed in visa, authentication, and civil registry services. Making passports available and accessible to every Filipino has always been a DFA priority. Hence, in the midst of the pandemic, we launched temporary off-site passport services, or TOPS, to help address the increased demand in passport services, focusing on simple passport renewals. As of June 22, there are now 20 operational TOPS throughout the country, 7 of which were opened earlier this year. As part of our efforts to enhance the global standing and credibility of the Philippine passport, the DFA proposes to transition to the 3rd generation e-passport booklets. To do this, amendments to the Passport Act of 1996 are necessary. This transition aims to render passport processing seamless and convenient, and make the production and security features of the Philippine passport at par with world standards and the latest technological advancements. The rollout of the new booklet will fulfill the recommendations made to the House of Representatives in 2017. The DFA has retained its quality management system under the ISO 9001-2015 standards based on the external audit last December 2021 by an independent ISO certifying body. The certification covers the passport, authentication, and visa application services of the Office of Consular Affairs in Asean and its consular offices in NCR, the assistance to national services of the Office of the Undersecretary for Migrant Workers, and all other passport services provided by our DFA home units. Mr. Chair, I also wish to report to the committee that the DFA, through its foreign service posts, presided over the highest voter turnout in overseas voting history in terms of both number of votes, 671,329, and percentage, 39.56%. For comparison, the voter turnout for the 2016 presidential elections were 432,706 voters, or 31.45%. I'm also happy to share that the DFA has now designated an all-career lineup of undersecretaries to oversee the various offices in the department. The current roster of senior management officials demonstrates the department's commitment to providing professional advice to the President as the chief architect of foreign policy. Mr. Chair, the DFA has also hoped to open more posts and consular offices to serve millions of Filipinos requiring our services. There's also a plan to rebuild our rundown headquarters to make its representations commensurate with the honor and pride that our country deserves. An improved headquarters will also provide our Foreign Service Corps the proper working environment that needs to deliver the high quality work that it's capable of doing. Mr. Chair, the men and women who constitute the DFA are, we believe, the finest in the civil service. I'm proud to serve with them. On their behalf, I seek your support in granting the Department of Foreign Affairs the budget that it needs to be able to do what is expected of us and even beyond that. An adequately funded DFA enables its highly competent officers and staff to protect and advance our national interests here and abroad and secure for the country its place as a responsible, reliable, progressive, and peace-loving member of the international community. With your permission, Mr. Chair, I would like to ask our representative from the Secretary for Fiscal Management Services to present the details of our budget proposal. Our Undersecretary for Admin, Mr. Antonio Morales. The DFA's attached agencies will, of course, make their own presentations. Thank you.
Yusek Morales, you are recognized.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Madam Chair, Senior Vice Chairperson, Congressman Biolago, the Honorable Vice Chairpersons and members of this committee. I am honored to present in more detail the DFA budget for fiscal year 2023. And may I request that the slides be shown? With the start of the new administration comes the opportunity to set the policy and tone in the Philippine foreign policy, not only for the next 6 years, but also as a lasting legacy. It is in this light that we hope that the 2023 budget is a budget that will allow us to build new and fortify existing foundations that will enable us to promote our national interests abroad and the interest of the Filipino people. May I also, I think the slides are not yet being presented, but just taking off from what the Secretary has presented earlier.
Comsec, can you kindly put up the slides of Yusek Morales?
Thank you, Madam Chair, for kindly reminding that the slides be flashed on screen.
You may proceed, Yusek.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to point out that the DFA is among the top revenue generating agencies of the Philippine government. And I think the slides will show that although revenue generation is not a core function of the DFA, it has ranked 6th or 7th among the top revenue generating non-Department of Finance agencies. The revenue generated by the DFA throughout the years has continued to grow. In 2019, it was 3.3 billion, but it has gone down in 2020 and 2021 because of the pandemic. But as of the first half of this year, it has already reached the levels of 2018 and 2019. We have now seen the recovery of passport applications. It has now gone back to its and promises to be double the number of passport applicants in 2019. And the revenues from foreign service posts, if I may go to the next slide, you will see that the top posts, the generated revenues were in North America, Los Angeles, San Francisco, and Toronto. In Europe, we have London, Milan, Rome. In the Middle East, Dubai, Riyadh, Abu Dhabi, and in Asia Pacific, Singapore, Hong Kong, and Kuala Lumpur. On a personal note, Madam Chair and honorable members, I have served in at least 6 of these posts where there are so many Filipinos and our revenues are quite high. And if you would notice when you travel to these countries, because of the number of Filipinos, the consular collections are also very high, and it coincides with the highest revenues from our foreign service posts. As the Secretary pointed out, we have 94 foreign service posts, 63 embassies in 63 countries, 27 consulates general, and 4 missions. Of course, the highest number of foreign service posts are situated in the Asia Pacific region. In the Philippines, the revenue from consular offices are, of course, highest in the National Capital Region. And of course, within the National Capital Region, it's highest in the DFA OCA Asean Consular Office. In the provinces, it's in Angeles and San Fernando, Iloilo, and Cebu. If you will look at the passport collections of the passport revolving fund, well, just to give a short background, you may be aware that the DFA is also authorized to collect fees for the processing and issuance of passport requiring special consideration, waiver or issuance beyond regular office hours. If you want expedited release, there is a fee, and it goes to the passport revolving fund, which shall be used to improve passport and consular and other services of the department. When the pandemic happened, Your Honors, the revenue collections decreased, and therefore the collections of the passport revolving fund has decreased. With the recovery now in place, we are seeing the increase in passport fees collection as well as in the revolving fund. May I also talk very briefly about our absorptive capacity for consular services? May I go to the next slide? If you will see from the next slide, our absorptive capacity has been quite good. In 2018 and 2019, the total budget utilization rate of the offices and posts under the passport, under the programs, activities, and projects include the provision of consular services, 97.65%. However, as upon the onset of the pandemic in fiscal year 2020, the utilization rate declined to only 67% because of the limited operations of the home office, but also in our foreign service posts all over the world. In fiscal year 2021, we saw some recovery and our absorptive capacity increased to 75%. But as of June 30, 2022, the budget utilization rate already amounted to almost 70% as we resumed normal business operations. Based on this, we are confident that we will reach 90% of our BUR for this year. As the Secretary also pointed out, the DFA ranks 6th in revenue from fees. We collect a lot of fees, but our national expenditure program, our budget is only 0.39% of the total budget. If we include while the national budget, Your Honors, grew to 5.268 trillion, the budget of the DFA and its attached agencies decreased from 21.7 billion to 20.30 billion, which is clearly a budget cut in absolute and relative terms, which is something difficult to imagine given the inflation rate, the increase in the number of Filipinos abroad, the increase in consular and passport applications, and not to mention the inflation rate, Madam Vice Chair. So this is something that we have to deal with, expanded functions, but shrinking budget. Over the years, may I go to the next slide? The revenue and budget of the DFA has increased consistently from 2017 to 2020 and has gone down in 2021 by a little and some more in 2022 and reduced again in 2020. The budget cut is an uneasy trend. But despite the meager budget, we are trying to do what we can to pursue our diplomatic goals, to promote our country's interests, and to extend services to Filipino nationals. We are doing what we can, Madam Vice Chair, with what we have, but we can do more if we are given more budget. For the fiscal year 2023 NEP budget of the DFA and its attached agencies, amounting to 20.3 million. The breakdown is shown on the screen. For the DFA proper, it's 20.175 billion. For the Foreign Service Institute, it's 65.7 million. The Unesco, 0.7. The Operation Council of a little over 3. The Visiting Forces Presidential Commission, a little over 37 million. So that's a relatively meager budget. If we go to Foreign Service Post, Madam Vice Chair, as I mentioned, we have 94 Foreign Service Posts, embassies, consulates generals, and missions. They were also not spared from the budget cuts. And our Foreign Service Posts, almost all of them have received a lower budget for fiscal year 2023, which amounts to 503 million pesos lower. And as we all know, the inflation is not only in our country, it's worldwide, Madam Chair. And so therefore, there is some reason for concern. The budgets for fiscal year 2022, Congress introduced amendments were also reduced from the 2023 NEP of the DFA. And among the items that were deducted were the additional budget for Washington DCPE, Osaka Consulate, Geneva World Trade Organization Philippine Mission, and also for budget for posts opened in 2019, which includes Stockholm, Sweden, Rabat, Morocco, Barcelona, Nagoya, Melbourne, and Istanbul in the total amount of 42.8 million. Furthermore, the department also sustained a budget cut in one of its most important and basic line items, which is the recall, the deployment and recall costs. Despite the higher airfares now and travel costs, our deployment and recall costs have been reduced by almost 117 billion pesos. So we have to deploy less because, or our deployment will be affected because the airfares have gone up and the cost of travel have gone up, but our budget for deployment has gone down. The budget cuts by foreign service posts, as I've mentioned, the DBM augmented the Tier 1 ceiling for the passport printing to meet the funding in the MICA, but reduced the consular operations funds of foreign service posts. Riyadh PE in Saudi Arabia, where we have a very large number of Filipinos, our second largest revenue generating post, received the biggest cut in budget for its consular operations in the amount of 26.55 million. Singapore PE, our embassy in Singapore, which also hosts a large concentration of Filipinos, and the largest revenue in Asia, second only to Riyadh. Although it has less Filipinos, it has high revenues. It suffered a budget cut of 11.5 million. New York Consulate General's budget was reduced by 10.3 million. London, Philippine Embassy in London by about as much at 9.5 million. And our embassy in Tokyo's budget was reduced by 8.16 million. And where's the Home Office, the Office of Consular Affairs, will see a budget cut in its consular operations in the amount of 268.54 million. So, Your Honors, the point is we are a top revenue generating agency, that our functions are increasing, but our budget, especially for foreign service posts and our consular operations, have been reduced. May I now proceed to give a clear picture, Madam Vice Chair, and to the honorable members, of the number of personnel of the department. We hope that the honorable members of this committee would appreciate that the DFA already operates on a very lean, limited human resource complement. We only have 2,866 filled regular positions. This 2,876 personnel serve in the Philippines and in our 94 embassies, consulates generals, and missions abroad. If you will compute it on the ratio of number of Filipinos, for every DFA personnel posted abroad, the ratio is 1:7,175 Filipinos. In the Americas, we serve 5 million plus overseas Filipinos, 2.3 million in Asia Pacific, 535,000 in Europe, and 2,440,000 15 in Middle East and Africa. We have a very lean personnel complement, and we serve millions of Filipinos abroad. And if I may add, we don't just serve them for passports. Our services range from the moment a Filipino arrives abroad, a Filipino is born abroad, up to the moment the Filipino returns to the Philippines or dies abroad, because we register the debt and we extend assistance, so that any increase in the number of Filipinos will also mean an increase in the workload for our limited number of personnel. On the utilization of our fiscal year 2021 funds, we have disbursed almost 78% out of the obligation, obligated 82%, and allotted out of appropriation is 89.8%. Indeed, Your Honors, the DFA is able to do much with less, and in 2021, the DFA was able to obligate 82.25% of its allotment and disbursed almost 78%. The disbursement rate for fiscal year 2021 is shown on the next slide, please. The biggest are personal services, followed by MOOE, financial expenditures, and capital outlay. This disbursement rate, as may be seen from the screen, can be broken down by expense class: 86.39% for PS, 71.49% for MOOE, 71.67% for financial expenditures, and 32.36% for CO. The 2023 NEP by expense class. In terms of expense class for DFA OSEX budget, PS is at 40.8%, MOE at 53.9%, and capital outlay at 5.1%. This larger ratio of MOE and CO shows that the department spends more on its operations than the upkeep of its personnel. However, despite this performance, the department is still looking at budget reductions in 2023 in the submitted NEP as follows: PS decreased by 743 million, MOE by 681 million, and PNEX by 1.668 million. Only capital outlay increased, but only by 68.5 million. The changes in the budget led to a net decrease, a budget cut amounting to 1.357 billion. May I now proceed, Madam Chair, to our 2023 NEP for big ticket projects. For our big ticket projects, assistance to nationals and legal assistance remain at 1 billion and 200 million respectively. The international commitment funds is at 2.3 billion, and the budget for overseas voting is 43.4 million. However, it is worth noting that the building fund, which is a very important fund for the upkeep of our chanceries and consulates, it was given a meager 809.949 million. And our assessment is that we need 2.198 billion for next year. And finally, the budget for e-passport booklets amounting to 3.839 billion was given in accordance with the Mayowa dated 20 July 2015, which was granted to the department. And this was done by reducing consular operation funds of the Office of Consular Affairs and our Foreign Service Post. Next slide, please. The utilization of our 2022 funds. As of June 30 this year, the DFA has already obligated 60.74% of its allotment. And this is for the DFA's utilization of funds and not just for consular operations. The obligation rate of fiscal year 2022 funds may be seen on the screen. Almost 60% for PS, 66% for MOOE, 69% for PINEX, and 29% for CO. For the capital outlay, the construction of the Philippine Embassy in Singapore's Chancery amounting to 531 million and other projects including car refitting are not yet included in our computation, since these were obligated after June 30, 2022. The inclusion of these two big ticket projects will fully utilize DFA's CO budget for fiscal year 2022. If you have visited our embassy in Singapore, you would know that it really needs to be renovated, and it is now included among our priorities. Increasing the DFA's 2023 budget will fortify the capacity of the DFA to better serve Filipinos here and abroad, especially for what the Secretary pointed out, 10.5 million strong diaspora. This will also allow the DFA to respond to the increasing demand for consular services, for passport services. And our Assistant Secretary for Consular Affairs is here. He has been working very hard to improve passport services among other consular services, but they really need the budget to do that. As such, the DFA requests the favorable consideration of Tier 2 proposals. And among the Tier 2 proposals is to restore the budget cuts in consular operations. If you want more details, our Assistant Secretary can provide this. The budget for e-passports in the Tier 1 hard ceiling was 3.294 billion. However, the authorized amount for fiscal year 2023 per Mayowa is 3.839 billion. To meet the Mayowa requirements, the DBM reduced 544 million because there is a need for an increase in this hard ceiling. The DBM got this from a reduction in the OCA Home Office and from the Foreign Service post that I mentioned earlier. The budgets of the OCA Home Office and Foreign Service posts have to be restored, Your Honors, to meet the increasing demand for passports and other consular services. And another proposal under Tier 2 is the operation of 20 temporary off-site passport services. If you will observe going around the malls, Your Honors, we have temporary off-site passport services rendered in a number of malls in not only in Metro Manila, but also in the provinces. And just to name a few, you will see at the SM Mall of Asia, SM City North EDSA, Robinson's Place, SM Aura, Robinson's Place, Las Piñas, Ayala Malls, Glorieta 3, Newport. I will not enumerate all of them, but there are also a few in Zambales, San Pedro Laguna, Cebu, Davao, Novaliches, Lipa, Batangas, San Fernando, Malolos, Angeles, Bacolod, Iloilo. I was told by Undersecretary De Vega that the Honorable Vice Chairperson renewed his passport at the BGC. So if next year there's no budget, we will have no passport office in BGC, Your Honor. Tier 2 proposal to increase the budget for salaries of local hires to meet the actual requirements of foreign service posts. If you visit any of our embassies and consulates abroad, Your Honors, you will see some foreigners working in our embassies. They are our local hires. And in some countries, it's vital that we have them, especially if you go to China, where English is not widely spoken, or in some countries in Europe where English is not widely spoken, or in the Middle East, we really need local hires to serve as interpreters, etc. And also, even if we are embassies, we are not exempt from complying with local labor laws. And local labor laws of host countries require an increase in salaries and other benefits of local hires, especially in Europe, where they give a lot of protection to their workers, even those working in embassies and consulate. The DBM has transferred the budget for local hires from PS to MOOE. Instead of PS, they moved it to MOE, and it opens the fund to budgetary cuts. And as such, the miscellaneous personal benefit funds can no longer be tapped for terminal leave benefits or mandatory salary increases. In certain countries, every year they have to increase the salaries of local hires among the local people. Continuing in this vein of service to Filipinos overseas, the continued employment of local hires remain very crucial in the operational readiness of the department. Considering the right-sizing efforts of the government, as well as the current limitation in the deployment of organic personnel, we really need to engage local hires who provide us with vital services, as I mentioned, translators, interpreters, and even as drivers. To meet the salary and other personal benefits required by local labor laws of the host countries, the DFA will need additional 278 million pesos. However, the DBM has unilaterally moved the budget to MOOE, and this opens the funding for local hires susceptible to budgetary cuts. The MPBF can no longer be tapped as well, limiting the funding of government to meet terminal leave benefits or salary increases that are mandatory in the host country. So we ask Your Honors for the restoration of the budget for the payment of our local hires. Increase in the 2023 building fund. The DFA initially proposed 2.198 billion for fiscal year 2023 building fund. The DBM granted less than half at 808.9 million. This fund is used for the acquisition and renovation of properties abroad and in the Philippines, and for the purchase of furniture and fixtures. As you see in the photo, the funds obligated for the Philippine Center in New York, covering the repair of damaged sidewalk vault, adobe facade, and sidewalk leak, amounted to 59.8 million, while funds to upgrade its 2 elevators amounted to 53.5 million, for a total amount of 113.3 million charged against the building fund. These funds were necessary in the maintenance of the building. If you visit our mission in New York, you will see that it's really an old building and there are need for urgent emergency repairs. Another tier 2 proposal is the budget for the newly established Office of Civilian Security.
Yusek Morales.
Yes, ma'am.
We have a very long list of interpellators. Could you kindly wind up your presentation? We can return to the details when those specific questions are asked.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. I'm sorry to take up a lot of time. There are a lot of details I have to cover. But as you said, may I just conclude and then I will let our colleagues talk about requested. In the DFA, we try to do as much as we can with what we get, but we can only do so much with less and less. But if the Congress can restore the budget, the DFA can certainly do more. And through our proposed budget increases, Tier 2 projects, and amendment to special provisions, we can assure you, Madam Vice Chair, honorable members of the committee, that we can achieve even more. To sum up, our budget request for 2023, in our budget request for 2023, the DFA has demonstrated that it can do so much with a very spare budget. Imagine, Madam Chair and the honorable members of the committee, how much more the DFA could accomplish if you would grant us the additional funds we are requesting, Tier 2 projects and amendments to special provisions. I did not go into the details on the special provisions, Madam Chair and the honorable members, but I'll be happy to do so if you would allow me later. The argument that we make before you today is that the Department of Foreign Affairs can deliver more effective consular services while more vigorously and robustly projecting and protecting our national interests in the global arena. But we count on your valuable support for our budgetary requirements for fiscal year 2023 as presented before the Honorable Committee. That concludes my presentation, Madam Chair, and to the honorable members of Congress and my colleagues, and I would be happy to answer some any questions. Thank you.
Salamat, Secretary Enrique Manalo and Yusek Morales. At this point, the chair would like to recognize or acknowledge the presence of additional members. We have Minority Leader Marcelino Libanan, Rep. Mark Go, Deputy Minority Leader Franz Castro, Rep. Joseph Tan, Vice Chair Mitsika Ayon Uy, Rep. Arlene Brosas, Rep. Brian Revilla, Rep. Anthony Rolando Goles, Rep. Roman Romulo, Deputy Majority Leader Marlene Agabas, Rep. Arman Panaligan, and Vice Chair Medicua. Before we open the floor to questions, I anticipate a lot of questions on OFW. So let me just ask a very quick clarificatory question. What is the mandate of the DFA with respect to repatriation of OFWs, considering that there's a newly created department, the Department on Migrant Workers, with its attached agency, OWA? And so is that mandate shared? And if so, is there cost sharing with respect to repatriation costs?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think your question is a little bit not complicated, but there are a lot of details. Perhaps I could give the floor to our Undersecretary from the Migrant Workers, Undersecretary De Vega. He could probably go into some detail on your question.
Yusek De Vega, you're recognized.
Thank
The
you.
shortest possible way to answer the question.
I'll start. Greetings right now, even as we speak. We just repatriated 22 Filipinos, the latest batch from Sri Lanka, fully paid by the Department of Foreign Affairs. We must understand that under RA 11641, their coverage will be for migrant workers. Out of the 10.5, or actually now closer to 10.7 actually, million Filipinos overseas, a majority would still be covered under the DFA because Filipino nationals who are immigrants, permanent residents, or already citizens or dual citizens of those countries will continue to be under our mandate. Filipino nationals who just happen to be there, perhaps tourists, visitors, or exchange program or so, will still be covered by the Department of Foreign Affairs. And for posts or areas where there is still no POLO, Philippine Overseas Labor Office, or what they would call eventually the MWO, Migrant Workers Office, it will still be primarily the DFA who will take responsibility for repatriation. And so we're doing now it's with with Sri Lanka. Just a few weeks ago, I came home with 290 or 288 Filipinos from Kuwait. We're going to repatriate in the next few weeks. In fact, next week, another group of around 300 from Kuwait. And the next few months, about 3 or 4 more flights have been chartered for Saudi Arabia. How do we distinguish it? Well, if they are migrant workers who are documented, that's where OWA and the DMW will come in. And as part of our cooperation, for example, last Sunday, the Polo did repatriate a number from Saudi Arabia. We're always in touch. What we do, for example, for the Filipinos now came from Sri Lanka, we contact, if it's DFA payment, we contact them, and then they'll be in charge of their integration into Philippine society, meaning giving them jobs and so forth. So we will still have an important mandate, Your Honor and Your Honors. Magandang hapon po.
Thank you. So at this point, some reminders. So we would like to remind our colleagues that each member has 5 minutes for your questions, excluding the response of our resource persons. And when you hear this bell, the doorbell sound, that means that you only have 30 seconds left. So you need to wind up your questions. And again, as part of a long-standing and cherished tradition of the House of Representatives, we accord preferential treatment to the minority members of the House, and they shall be followed by the majority members in an alternating manner. So at this point, the chair yields to Vice Chair Bialago.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Once again, magandang hapon po sa ating lahat. So the chair will now recognize our distinguished minority leader, Marcelino Libanan, for his interpolation.
Thank you, Honorable Chairman Bialago. To our officers and members of the Department of Foreign Affairs. At the outset, I reserved my interpellation during the plenary, but I was around when Secretary Enrique Manalo paid his courtesy call to the speaker, together with my kababayan, my able and hardworking kababayan, Assistant Secretary Raul Hernandez. So I just would like to thank you for implementing well the Republic Act 9225, the reacquisition of the Philippine citizenship law, which I personally authored and sponsored in Congress. And I had the feedback that it is easier to apply and process the papers in your respective consulates than in the Immigration Bureau. So congratulations for that. And Mr. Chairman, we passed Republic Act 7157, otherwise known as the Philippine Foreign Service Act of 1991, September 1991. And Section 63 thereof provides that upon the recommendation of the Secretary of Foreign Affairs, as soon as practicable, submit for enactment by Congress of a Foreign Affairs Retirement and Disability System, taking into account the difficulties of foreign service personnel in setting aside sufficient savings to take care their eventual retirement in the Philippines due to old age and some other disability, with the increased burden of establishing a home in the Philippines after completion of their tour of duty abroad. Mr. Chairman, since 1991 until now, we have failed to pass this retirement law for our foreign workers who are hardworking, and actually we're very proud of these workers in government for their service to our country. So I would like to personally inform you that I have filed already this bill, House Bill number 4077, and I would like to encourage all my colleagues to co-author this bill. So I will be interpolating in the plenary for policy directions of the Department of Foreign Affairs. Thank you, Madam Chair, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much, to our minority leader. Next to interpolate from independent, our minority leader, Edsel Lagman. You are now recognized. Is it via Zoom, Comsec?
Thank you, Vice Chairman Violago. I truly commensurate with the DFA on its reduced budget for 2023. But as an opposition member of the House, I believe that the onus of providing an adequate budget for your department is on the ruling majority. May I proceed with my questions now, Madam Chair and Vice Chairman Violago. A Pulse Asia survey from June 24 to 27, 2002 showed that 89% of Filipinos want President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. to assert the Philippines' right over the West Philippine Sea. I think the good secretary must be aware of this survey.
Secretary Enrique, there's a question from Representative Lagman about the Philippine Sea, about
The Pulse Asia survey.
there's a Pulse Asia survey that 89% wants President Marcos to assert about the Philippine Sea.
Thank you very much. Because I think it's quite clear that the president's position is quite clear, and I think I could just refer to what he mentioned in his own speech, that he would not preside over any process where we would have to yield even an inch of Philippine sovereignty. And I think he was referring there, of course, without mentioning it, to the West Philippine Sea, and we will be guided by that policy direction of the president regarding the West Philippine Sea.
Thank you very much, Secretary. Representative Lagman.
Mr. Vice Chair, I was much elated when I heard the good secretary stress that the arbiter ruling and the UNCLOS are the twin anchors of the Philippine foreign policy in the West Philippine Sea. Does this mean, good secretary, that the new administration will enforce our arbitral victory in the Philippine exclusive economic zone in the West Philippine Sea against China?
Mr. Secretary.
Yes, Mr. Vice Chairman, of course, the Philippine policy is being implemented by a number of agencies. And I can speak on behalf of the Department of Foreign Affairs. In accordance with our mandate, we will do the utmost we can to support and implement the president's policy. So when we say that the anchors of our approach towards the West Philippine Sea, that is the arbitral ruling and the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea, that is in line with our other policy directive that any resolution of disputes should be resolved through peaceful, diplomatic, and legal means. And that is the approach that we are adopting as far as the DFA is concerned, in coordination with other agencies. So how is this put in practice? Well, there are many ways. The first, of course, if there's any incident in the West Philippine Sea by another country, especially our large neighbor, we have not failed to bring it to their attention in the most basic ways through a note verbal, and we have consistently in a note verbal indicated our displeasure or whatever to any incident which we feel is against our interests. We've also adopted other means of implementing this. That is through our contacts with China. Every time we meet high level officials with China, and I have done so on at least 2 occasions with the foreign minister of China and also just recently last week with another official from China. We have never failed to indicate our position in the South China Sea is anchored on the arbitral award of 2016, as well as the UNCLOS. We also have mechanisms where we deal with China, where we always mention this. And it's by consistently referring to this that we're able to uphold the president's ruling, president's directive in policy. So I think that is how we are implementing what we say the anchors of our approach. But our approach, again, as I say, is through peaceful, diplomatic, and legal means. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Secretary Manalo.
Well,
Representative Lagman.
what are specifically these diplomatic and legal means in order to enforce these twin anchors of our foreign policy in the West Philippine Sea?
Yes, Secretary Manalo, please.
Well, diplomatic means, for example, in many levels. At the bilateral level, as I mentioned, we have what we have created with China, the bilateral consultation mechanism on the South China Sea. And in this mechanism, which met at least once or twice every year until COVID, but we plan to meet again soon with China. In this forum, we have consistently stated our position on the South China Sea. Not only do we inform China of any incidents in the South China Sea, but we have made clear to them our non-acceptance of their so-called historical approach, or the 9-dash line, because we abide by the ruling of the arbitral ruling and UNCLOS. That's a bilateral consultation mechanism. We also have other mechanisms with China, the foreign ministry consultations, where we also raise this. We always raise the issue of West Philippine Sea with them. That's at the bilateral level. At the regional level, we have the ASEAN. We are currently negotiating the ASEAN-China Code of Conduct on the South China Sea. And in this forum, we are seeking to come up with a code of conduct which will attempt to manage relations in the South China Sea, while we recognize the differences there are still disputes in the area. But we're trying to come up with a code which would help manage countries in the region to avoid any conflict in the light of these differences. And I must say that in the South China Sea, so not only the Philippines and China which have issues, but there's also Vietnam, Malaysia, and other countries. So that's at the regional level with the ASEAN. At the international level, the Philippines has consistently raised, for example, in the UN General Assembly debate in the 6th committee, the legal committee, we have always raised the issue of in our statements on the arbitral award. And I'm glad to say that last year, or even this year, I think, in the debate in the UN General Assembly, at least 6 or 7 countries came forward to support the arbitral award and mentioned very clearly that China should abide by the ruling. And I think that's was also very heartening, because now it's not only the Philippines which says that. And we will continue to do that, to raise it in the UN, for example, in the 6th committee, legal committee, and at the regional level with our ASEAN partners, and in any other region meeting we may have which touches on this issue, and of course on the bilateral issue. And we raise it with our other bilateral partners too. United States, for example, Japan, Australia, they've all consistently supported us, and we always discuss this also with them. So in other words, we try and implement this at least 3 levels. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Secretary Manalo.
Mr. Chairman,
Representative Laman.
in all of these modes, bilateral negotiation with China, regional negotiations, international in the UN, may we know, good Secretary, whether we have a glimpse of the light at the end of the tunnel?
We're having a glimpse. But we have to recognize that the light of the tunnel may not necessarily be the absolute light. What I think our immediate goal is to, while we maintain our position, while we recognize that there are differences, it's important that we learn to manage those differences without giving up our position and our concerns. And we will consistently harp on that. In that sense, there is a glimmer of hope that at least we will be talking with China on this issue. This is from the point of view of Department of Foreign Affairs. And while we maintain that dialogue and continually press on our points, we will not let China forget about this issue. And that's how we intend to proceed on this. So in that sense, and China has agreed. So at least they recognize there's an issue. And they also realize that we will not let go of this issue.
Mr.
Thank you very much,
Vice
Secretary
Chair.
Manalo. Representative
Mr.
Blanca.
Vice Chair, if one of the anchors is the arbitral ruling, I don't think we are going to see any glimpse of hope with China, because China has rejected the arbitral ruling. So this is plainly moro-moro, talking with China about asserting our arbitral victory over the West Philippine Sea. I think there should be other modes which the good secretary should pursue in order that we could truly assert our right over our arbitral victory, sustaining the sovereignty of the Philippines. Now, let me ask the good secretary, is there any budget in your proposed appropriation earmarked specifically for the enforcement of the arbitral ruling against China?
Secretary Manalo, your response, please. Yes,
Thank
Secretary
you,
Manalo.
and thank you, Congressman, for your points. First, on the arbitral ruling, it's true that perhaps the Philippines on its own cannot really enforce. But as I said, I'm quite heartened that more countries have come out in the open for this. And our belief is the more and more countries in the future that can speak out in favor of the arbitral ruling, it would create some diplomatic pressure on China, at least to realize that the international community, or at least more and more members of the community, are supporting the arbitral ruling, because the arbitral ruling is basically saying the freedom of navigation, the right for it's a basic right. And I think the more and more countries that come out with it, we will get some support. I admit it will be diplomatic support, but that also does lead to some pressure for China to at least listen and respond, we hope. And as I said last year, we had at least 6 or 7 countries speak out, and that was good. As for the budget, we have an office, the MOAO, our maritime office. I'm not quite sure how big its budget will be. It is, but certainly if we had a budget to help us to study, not only to see how we can better implement or enforce or enhance our approach to the arbitral ruling, and also we're open to other ideas. Certainly that would be very helpful to us if there was something allocated to that. Could I just add that as of now, we have already had on countries that support the arbitral ruling, they have already said that they support it. And in fact, in supporting it, they have called on China to support it. We have the US, Australia, Canada, Japan, Germany, France, Denmark, and the EU. That's a little bit more than what we had a few years ago. So I think more and more, hopefully, countries will speak out and help create this diplomatic pressure on China. Thank you.
Mr. Secretary, correct me if I'm wrong. Yung sagot is practically there's no allocated budget for that purpose. Because that's the question. Specific question.
We have no specific allocation.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Secretary.
May I proceed,
Guzman?
Mr. Chairman? If the good secretary is requested to propose the amount necessary to defray expenses for the enforcement of the award, how much is he going to propose?
Yes, Mr. Secretary, your response, please. May I remind Representative Lagman, after the good secretary responds to your question,
yes.
it will be
Could I,
kindly wind up.
Could I
Yes,
perhaps
I will
consult
wind
and
up
come
with the
back?
last
Because
question.
to get the kind of amount that we could suggest, I just have to discuss with our. Okay.
Okay, yes,
I can request the good secretary to submit their proposal to the committee so that we will not be spending much time. Now, let me just wind up. How inflexible, Mr. Secretary, is the motherhood statement of, quote, friend to all and enemy to none?
yes, Mr. Secretary.
It's inflexible, but I think what the president is saying, we're friends to all, enemy to none, but are in accordance with our national interest. That's the way we will approach it.
In other words, to secure our national interests, that motherhood statement is flexible against a recidivist aggressor in our exclusive economic zone. Is that correct?
Any aggressor to the Philippines, and as the president said, he will not preside over any process which gives up an inch of the country, is part and parcel of his foreign policy.
But as he said that, Mr. Secretary, this aggressor in the in our exclusive economic zone has been intruding and arrogating portions of our territory. Is it not?
Yes, through the in the incursions through the EEZ, yes, I agree completely. That is the approach we're taking now with them, as I mentioned earlier, to the various means of the bilateral, regional, and international level. We have pointed out these incursions and these violations of our EEZ, and we've not failed to do so, and we will continue to do so.
With the indulgence of Representative Lagman, your time is up.
Yes, I just regret to say that our approaches are too quixotic. Maraming salamat.
Thank you very much, Representative Lagman. For our next interpolator from the majority, we have Vice Chair Jose Alvarez for his interpolation. The chair will recognize Congressman Alvarez.
Thank you, Vice Chair, and thank you, Madam Chair. Can I ask the question now? I'm Jose Alvarez po from Palawan. Can I ask the Secretary? Regarding your TOPS, is it possible that one of you or one of your subordinates come with me to southernmost back door, because there are over 1 million Filipinos living in Sabah without passports. If we can study together, I'll be most happy to provide the infrastructure to receive them in an island which is just 2 hours away from North Borneo, northernmost tip, which is the town of Kudat in the northernmost tip of Borneo. And we can provide the infrastructure in the southernmost island, a 23-hectare island in the barangay of Mangsi in the town of Balabac, populated by 10,000 people, 6,000 of whom are children, 4,000 of whom are adults, and almost 2,000 of the adults are not present there. That you can see the light of North Borneo in the evening. So if you're not familiar with the place, I'd like to request that even with your meager budget, we don't need for you to spend money. I will sponsor the trip for you to study with me how we can help 1 million Filipinos without identity in Sabah. That's my proposal or a question, Mr. Secretary, whether it's possible for you to create a team, a working group, to come with me and study the problem so that we can somehow help my constituents that are officially and unofficially traveling to Sabah and out of Sabah to the southernmost backdoor in Balabac. Thank you very much.
Secretary Enrique.
Thank you very much, Congressman. I think, and thank you for your suggestion. First, let me say, we would be very happy to explore your suggestion. And I could, in fact, ask when we study this, probably I could ask our consular people to look into this with your suggestions. So certainly we'll be happy to explore to see how that can be done. But let me just make 2 points. The first is that normally our embassy in Kuala Lumpur regularly sends consular missions to our kababayan in Sabah, and we've also opened a consular office in Kidipawan. So we're actually we're going further south to see how we can also address some of the points that you raised. So I think that's what we're doing, but we'll be very happy to explore and see how your suggestion could perhaps be put into practice.
Mr. Secretary, with due respect, Madam Chairman, Kuala Lumpur is 3 hours away by flight to Kota Kinabalu. In this island, you can see Bangi by the eyesight, and you can see the lights of northern Borneo. It's very, very proximate. And I'm talking about the convenience of the more than 1 million Filipinos living in Sabah. Remember, until now, although we have not aggressively pursued the claim to Sabah, we have been friends with them. But still, the problem of the Sabah issue is always pointed at my face when I visit there, because it's mentioned in our constitution that Sabah is our territory. So let's study together. I'll support you with your meager budget. There's no need to spend money. I will sponsor the trip. And let's study the matter. And I'll be most grateful if we can do something, because most of them do not have identity cards. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Representative Alvarez. Our next interpreter from the minority, Senior Deputy Minority Leader Paul Dasa, you're now recognized.
He's not here po, Vice Chair.
Okay, next, Deputy Minority Leader Franz Castro.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Magandang hapon po sa ating lahat. Yung ating pong pinag-uusapan ay napakahalaga sa mamamayang Pilipino, kaya gusto ko po magsalita ng Tagalog. At inaasahan ko rin po yung ating Secretary, Madam Chair, ay ganun din kasi pinag-uusapan natin dito yung West Philippine Sea at saka yung claim natin. Dahil for so many years, at least 6 years, mukhang nabudol-budol ang mga Filipino sa pangako ng Duterte administration kaugnay dito sa claim natin sa West Philippine Sea. So if you will define the independent foreign policy of the Marcos administration, what would that be, Mr. Secretary, Mr. Vice Chair?
Secretary Enrique.
The independent foreign policy of the administration now is actually a continuation of our long-standing policy that our policy will be based on the national interest of the Philippines and not beholden to any other power or any other country, and that our relations will be guided by this. That's why, and at the same time, though, ang aim natin is to ensure that we seek to promote cooperation and be friends to as many as possible and enemies to none, provided that is in accordance with our national interest. So that is how we intend to implement an independent foreign policy.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, Mr. Vice Chair. So very general yung statement natin about yung national interest. Sinabi na rin yan ng Duterte administration. Pag sinabi nating national interest, so syempre yung interest natin sa soberanya, yung interest natin economically dun sa West Philippine Sea, which is hindi nangyari hanggang ngayon. Dumadaing yung ating mga mangingisda na talagang pinahihirapan sila na makarating doon sa West Philippine Sea para mangisda doon sa sarili nating sa sarili nating teritoryo. So under the Duterte administration, the DFA already sent numerous diplomatic protests, but Chinese incursion still continue. So ano po ba yung pinagkaiba ng plano ng Marcos administration to uphold our sovereignty and territorial integrity? Parang sinasabi niyo ba na parehas lang ito sa Duterte administration? So kung pagpapatuloy lang po ito ng policy ng Duterte administration, baka walang mahita ang mga Pilipino dito sa ganitong independent foreign policy. So ano po, pwede niyo po bang pag-ibahin kung meron man yung independent foreign policy ng Marcos and Duterte administration?
Secretary Enrique.
Thank you. Of course, we will maintain the aspects which enable us not only to at least defend or promote our sovereignty, but also the well-being of the Filipinos in the West Philippine Sea, the fishermen, and as well as our territorial integrity, and to protect the EEZ. Now, sinabi ko na kanina some points, some issues, some ways that we're doing it at the bilateral level, sa regional level, and sa international level. But at the same time, that doesn't preclude us from being flexible in how we approach and maybe find innovative ways of doing it. But I just have to say that ang pinaka-importante dito is that we have to always be, when we talk to China, to always inform them of this. That's at our level sa Department of Foreign Affairs. Of course, dito sa implementation ng Philippine foreign policy, there are other agencies also involved. And we have yung National Task Force on the West Philippine Sea, which is both DFA, Department of National Defense, and also National Security, NSA. And nag-meeting kami, and each within our own mandate, try and see how we can promote and defend the Philippine interests. Ang sinasabi ko lang is from the point of view of the DFA. We are trying at all levels to do this, but we're also cooperating with DND, for example, which deals with the defense. And here there are also ways of where we do it and try and defend ourselves. For example, there are also in our relations, for example, with the United States, we have a treaty, a defense treaty, and various let's say measures or activities could be done to improve our defense, not necessarily aimed at any country, but to improve our defense, etc. So I think this would be a number of agencies would be involved in this. But from our perspectives at DFA, we're continuing our present approach, but it doesn't mean that we're closed to all other options. And I think that if we can find a good option later, why not? We're always open to that. So basta the underlying interest is to see how we can best promote our interest in the West Philippine Sea and uphold, among others, the ruling, the arbitral ruling.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Secretary.
Mr. Secretary. Sana in the future makarinig po tayo ng konkretong solusyon ng gagawin ng Marcos administration para malayang makapangisda yung ating mga mangingisda doon sa West Philippine Sea. Another question, last June 2022, Philippines terminated talks with China for a joint exploration for oil and gas in the West Philippine Sea. Former Foreign Affairs Secretary Locsin also said 3 years on and we had not achieved our our objective of developing oil and gas resources, so critical for the Philippines, but not at the price of sovereignty, not even particle of it. So last August 29, former Chinese ambassador to the Philippines, Liu, said that he is hoping that Marcos administration will consider it again. So anong tingin po, Mr. Vice Chair, ng ating secretary dito sa mangyayaring yung oil exploration? Tingin po ba natin ay matutuloy ito? At paano po gaganahan siya ang Pilipinas dito sa magiging exploration na ito, Madam Chair?
Secretary Manalo, please respond.
Yes, thank you. Well, yes, we did terminate our talks with China on the oil and gas last June kasi walang agreement on. I think the main issue was the applicable law kasi there were some talks, so they broke down. But we have already indicated to China our openness to have new talks on oil and gas exploration. But that's talks. Depende na now, if we have talks, we have to see what will happen. Kung sakali we negotiate an agreement, our guiding position will be any agreement that we enter into with China or any country for that matter, dun sa area that we're looking at, within the I think the various areas na may service contracts, we will be not agreeing to anything which is not in accordance with the Philippine Constitution. And that will be our guiding principle in whatever kind of agreement na negotiate namin with China or any country for that matter in that area. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Secretary Manalo. Next.
Mr. Vice Chair, I'm winding up. Last question na po ito, no? So the ratio of the personnel as to the number of Filipino na siniservice natin abroad is 1:7,175. Very terrible. That's why kung may mga human rights violations sa mga kapwa natin Pilipino sa abroad, so mahirap So pwede po bang malaman, Madam Chair, kung ilan yung mga COs natin and GOs sa DOF at paano natin mapupunan yung mga unfilled position sa DOF?
Sorry, GOF?
DOF?
Department of Foreign Affairs, kasi sabi natin kanina, no?
Ilan ang
DFA.
Ay, sorry, Department of Foreign Affairs. So, ulitin ko, yung COs kasi, tsaka yung JOs, meron po tayo all over agencies, no? Sa lahat ng agencies. So, ilan po yung mga COs and GOs natin?
Okay.
Kasi sinasabi natin, yung ratio is 1:7,175. So, ilan po yung mga vacant position at ano po yung plan natin para ma-fill up etong mga unfilled position sa DFA?
Maraming salamat. Thank you. Could I ask our Assistant Secretary Bensurto maybe to give the number?
Assistant Secretary Bensur,
Bensurto.
you're now recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Madam Chair, Your Honors. With respect to the COs, I suppose it's consular offices. Around the Philippines, we have something like 35 consular offices spread all over the country, the archipelago. And by next week, it will be 36 because we're opening a new consular office in Kidapawan. Our hope is to expand these offices all over the Philippines so that we can bring public service closer to the people rather than them going to Metro Manila. That is the hope, Madam Chair. And hopefully with the restoration of the budget, we would be enabled to start the process and generate the momentum. Obviously, we cannot do this in 1 year, but at least we could and we should start the process. And that's why we're making the plea for the restoration of the budget that was cut. In addition to this, Madam Chair, Mr. Chair, in addition to the consular offices, we also have the temporary offsite passport processing, actually. And we are very grateful to Congress because this actually was a congressional initiative to address the surge in terms of passport applications. And for this reason, we're able to help a lot of our kababayans in terms of their passport applications. But what we are requesting, Mr. Chair, is for this temporary off-site passport to become permanent. But more urgent than that, by the end of the year, if Tier 2 is not approved with respect to the budget allocated for these 20 temporary off-site processing offices, we would have something, something like 10,000 people on a daily basis will be impacted if they disappear. And that's why we're making the plea that for Congress to consider allocating that budget and on a much longer term to make these temporary off-site offices to become more permanent. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for asking that question, Your Honor.
Secretary Manalo.
Thank you, Chair. Could I just ask Undersecretary Morales to also address the other part of the question of the Honorable Representative dito on the unfilled posts?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair and Mr. Secretary and the Honorable Congresswoman. There are currently, as of June 30 this year, 4,008 personnel of the department, broken down as follows: 2,809 regular. Ito po yung may mga item. Casual po ng department ay 23. Contractual, 352. Contract of service, 187. Ang local hires po natin sa mga embassy natin sa ibang bansa, 462. Ang contract of service sa ibang bansa po ay 57. You are correct, Your Honor, in stating that there are a number of unfilled positions. Based on our SIPAP, there are currently there are two kinds of positions in the department po. One is the position where you can be assigned abroad, foreign service officers, foreign service staff, employees, foreign service staff, officers. But there are also those which are home-based po, especially our consular offices. These are home-based personnel who are not eligible for foreign assignment. Hindi po siya na-assign sa ibang bansa. As of the moment, we have a total of 640 home-based positions po, not just in the consular offices, but even in the home office. And the filled positions are 512, which leaves unfilled position po of 128. And what are we doing to address this concern? We have a personnel selection board po, which will meet this week. As soon as the vacancies arise, we already try to fill the positions, and this week we will fill a few of these positions, and hopefully, Your Honor, we can reduce it further. And we also have experience during the pandemic, a number of resignations, and we will try to fill that up, resignations for home-based personnel as well as for foreign service personnel. But may I assure you, Madam, Mr. Chair, and Your Honor, that we are doing everything we can to ensure that the vacancies are filled in as soon as possible. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you very much, Yusek Morales. Thank you very much, Representative Castro. The next in line from majority, Representative Toff Dividinsya. You're now recognized.
Thank you. Good afternoon to the DFA family, of course, Sec Manalo, Ma'am Stella, and of course, our Vice Chair. Okay, so all of my questions actually are in line with cultural diplomacy as well as possibly economic diplomacy insofar as creative industry is concerned. So we recently had our bill enacted into law. DFA has a role to play in our creative industry advocacy, as also emphasized by the president during his first State of the Nation address. I suppose, Mr. Chair, my first question is, where will creative industry policy fall under? Cultural diplomacy or economic diplomacy? And I'm only asking this because there seems to be two separate budget items in your NEP and also separate targets for both economic and public and cultural diplomacy. Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Sure. Should I?
Secretary, please respond.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, first, let me say that technically speaking, the creative industry as such is normally handled by DTI when it comes to creative. But on cultural, in the real cultural, is we in DFA we do have an Office of Public and Cultural Diplomacy, and that's generally handling cultural matters as such, whether they're especially international or bilateral. So and we also have kasi minsan they kind of overlap. And so we also have our Office of International Economic Relations, which also I think it falls under it. Huh? Yeah, the Cultural Diplomacy Office falls under that. So they minsan naglilink silang dalawa. But when it comes to the in terms of creative industry, normally it's the DTI which takes the lead sa mga government agencies.
I'm only asking, Mr. Chair, insofar as the diplomatic relations are concerned, because obviously there are bilateral agreements and opportunities for cross-country cooperation in creative industries. For example, forging bilateral agreements on film, being able to exhibit content, across countries with these bilateral cooperation. So I'm just wondering as to how this factors into the cultural diplomacy or economic diplomacy, I'm not sure, plans of the DFA, Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, first let me say that, for example, in terms of bilateral agreements, I just wanted to say that in terms of creative industries, the president is going to Indonesia next week. And in fact, one of the deliverables during his visit will be an MOU we have just signed on creative industry with Indonesia.
Oh, wonderful.
And we will sign it there. We have already finished negotiating with them. So that already is an example of what we do as a bilateral. But there, actually, it's the DTI which took the lead. DFA plays a kind of supportive role. But at the same time, the DFA also has a number of other, in purely on cultural matters, the DFA does play a leading role. And we have, for example, a number of cultural agreements with other countries. Colombia, we have one with China, but that's still subject to ratification. We have one with France. We have one with Jordan. And we have also with Malaysia. So we have at least cultural agreements with these countries, either finalized or in one case with France still under negotiation. But I think we will soon get one. We'll have to amend it. It's because it was signed in 2012, but has to be amended to update. So cultural diplomacy is a very active part of the DFA's activities. But of course, when it comes to some other aspects like creative industries, which are also cultural, we do some makeup ng government. We have to coordinate with DTI.
Okay. Right. Happy to know, Mr. Chair, that there is an MOU that's going to be signed in Indonesia. Is it very soon by the president? I guess my next question, since we're now talking about like bilateral ties, like one such mechanism within the DFA ecosystem is actually through the UNESCO National Commission of the Philippines, insofar as the Philippine Creative Cities Network is concerned. In fact, it's a biannual endorsement of cities to the network. And unfortunately, in 2021, none of our cities that were endorsed made it. to such network. So I suppose my last few questions, Mr. Chair, is first, to our two existing UNESCO cities in the country, which are Cebu for design and Baguio for craft and folk art. What kind of support does the UNESCO National Commission of the Philippines extend to them? Is it purely technical support, or is there also financial support, given that the UNACOM only really has 23.7 million in the 2023 NEP, which is a drop of 1.5 million in the previous budget fiscal year. Maybe we can get an answer on that first. What kind of
Yeah,
support?
Mr. Secretary.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Could I hand the floor over to Yusek Lazaro? She was formerly our ambassador to UNESCO in Paris, so she's quite familiar.
Yusek Lazaro, you're recognized.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Mr. Vice Chair. The question of the congressman, of the good congressman, that's true. Until now, we have only two cities, which is Cebu and Baguio, as you have mentioned. The support that may be needed here is beyond also that of the UNACOM. There is a lot. The success of Baguio and Cebu was based on a lot of support from the LGU concerned.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of technical work that was also given by the respective LGU. So
Right.
it's really a concerted effort,
Hmm.
Mr. Vice Chair, of in having these smart cities. And the how do you say this? The standard or the of UNESCO is really a very tough one.
Yeah.
It's very stringent, and if the technicalities are not followed, then it falls on the wayside. So we need a lot of support from the LGUs concerned too.
Right.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair.
Thank you very much, Yusek Lazaro.
Thank you. So, Mr. Chair, actually, that is one of the salient provisions of the Philippine Creative Industries Development Act, the creation of a Philippine Creative Cities Network, in which UNACOM plays a huge role alongside DILG and the League of Cities in creating this sort of network to incubate cities towards creativity, as well as accelerate cities towards membership to the UCCN, which is, as ma'am said earlier, Yusek Lazaro, it's very, very tough to make it to the cut. But when cities do, they enjoy so many incentives and they can galvanize their UCCN status for investments in their respective cities. I suppose my last question, Mr. Chair, is really for the Foreign Service Institute of the DFA. I saw that there is a 44.8 million budget for the formulation, development, conduct of personnel development and technical research, publication, and dissemination of studies on Philippine foreign policy. So I was just wondering if there are any plans within the FSI to create any studies within this year or next. I saw that there are 72 policy papers that are about to be completed in 2022 and another 72 target policy papers for 2023. Any papers or research on what President BBM mentioned in his SONA on leveraging creative industry and tourism for creating a unique and sustainable country brand, because obviously DOT is the one leading the branding initiative, but there has to be a foreign soft power kind of foreign affairs lens that lends itself into this initiative. As for example, with Japan, which has a cool Japan strategy, we need a similar strategy also that requires input from the DFA. So again, to condense that super long question, is there any paper or policy research that is to be undertaken by the FSI towards cultural policy or diplomacy, or more specifically creating a country brand similar to Cool Japan?
A good secretary.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Could I, through you, request our Ambassador Carino, who heads our FSI, perhaps to
Pardon,
to-
Mr. Chair, Ambassador.
Ambassador Carino.
Mr. Carino,
yes.
you are recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, and Madam Chair. Thank you very much, Congressman, for such very thoughtful and deep question. Yes, we have difficulties, and I agree with you that throughout my career in the DFA, we have not moved towards better policies, but we are changing that. Since I sat at the FSI, number one priority was to clean up FSI. The furniture, the surroundings was all 1970s. We're modernizing that. Number two, we have created a language laboratory with 12 booths to handle 10 languages. So each person who's interested in learning a language can enter the booth, spend an hour, and follow his or her own pace. So we are improving the language skills of our officers, but as well as their families. And this facility is open even to the other agencies, specifically those who are going to be posted abroad, so that when they land in their post, they can already communicate even simple things like how much is this, where do I get this, where can I find certain items, etc. Okay, FSI is also the publishing arm of the DFA. And before me, there were not many publications which follows exactly what you have just said. We are doing so much research and yet we are not publishing it. That has changed totally. We have published recently the FSI Insights and the FSI Insights and Commentaries, which prints all the researches of the cadets as well as our researchers. Last year, we published 14 books. Never in the history of the DFA has that been done. And it's even bigger than the publications of Anvil, of Vibal Publishing, of Ateneo Publishing, of UP Press, and all the other publications in the Philippines. And we are concentrating specifically on policies that affect our country. But at the same time, we are concentrating on cultural diplomacy and the creative industries, Your Honor, because FSI believes that the future of the Philippines is no longer in the call centers and other industries that are sunset already. That the creative industries is the one with the highest growth rate, not just in the Philippines, but in the entire world. We have to take advantage of that. And the beauty about the creative industries is it affects practically all the sectors of society. And because of that belief, some of our publications are already things like promoting Laguna's women who do things like straw hats, the embroidery of Lumban, the other parts of the Pila Laguna with their water lily weaving. Okay, these are part of the creative industries. So in other words, we are preserving our cultural heritage, but at the same time promoting them so that these industries will continue to grow and so that they will support their families. We have also done a project called the Dakila series, and we have already published a book entitled Dakilang Bulakenyo, featuring the arts and the artists of Bulacan. These artists were so happy that finally they are being recognized. And the beauty about that is these books help them to create more art. And the minute they see themselves in these books, their prices can go up, which means that with their artworks, they can help their families, they can educate their children. Okay? We are going to do next Pangasinan, and right now we are doing Pampanga and Cavite. We are featuring the artists of other provinces except Manila, except the National Capital Region. The NCR can take care of itself, but the people of the provinces, the creative people of the provinces need our help.
With indulgence of Mr.
Yes.
Carino,
Thank you.
kindly answer directly the question of Representative Divinisha. I think that's not the answer for his question.
Well,
If I may just restate my question really
Yes.
quickly, but I do appreciate all the publishing work that the FSI is doing. I was just asking if there's any research work that's being undertaken towards cultural diplomacy by the FSI, at least in line with President BBM's direction of galvanizing tourism and creative industry towards creating a unique strategic brand for the Philippines, because Japan has one. It's called Cool Japan. So I'm just wondering if there's an existing research initiative within the FSI for this. If not this year, perhaps next year, because it says in your NEP, you have a target of 72 policy papers to be undertaken next year. Is one of those 72 dedicated at least for what I just mentioned?
yes, Your Honor. The Cultural Diplomacy Unit and FSI are meeting to create the brand for the Philippines as far as these policies are concerned. And we have already started our talks, but definitely we need more budget in order to implement it next year. Yes, we are putting all of our people towards a new branding, specifically geared towards these targets and these policies of the new government. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Carino. Thank you very much,
Mr.
Divinisha.
Chair, there is just a request by Rep. Edsel Lagman for the FSI to donate those 14 books to the Library of Congress. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Representative Divinisha. Next to interpolate from the minority, Representative Marisa Del Mar Magsino.
Yes, good afternoon. Being the Assistant Minority Leader of the 19th Congress and the lone OFW party list, I would like to welcome, of course, Secretary Manalo and the rest of the DFA, ASECs, and USECs. Mr. Chair, I would like to say that DFA plays a very important lives in the lives of our OFs and our OFWs. And my passion started 22 years ago. And I can see that ASEC Raul Hernandez is a live witness in my love for our OFWs. Now, rest assured that we will do our best to defend the budget of the DFA. But may I ask, regarding the Legal Assistance Fund, which is a 200 million, and I think this is in 2018, and the Assistance to National Fund, which is 1 billion in 2018, or it's it up to the present. May we ask what is the current status of these funds as of now, and what is the breakdown of the assistance given to each fund and to whom it was given? And can we also have a copies of the guidelines governing the use of these funds to be able to inform our constituents, our OFWs and our OFs to be able to avail of the benefits and the assistance, because not all of our OFWs are well learned, they are not too high tech, and we would like to make it too easier for them to be able to register, to be able to communicate, and minsan nga po, pagpunta lamang po sa embassy, nahihirapan sila because sa kanilang employer, meron po mga times na hindi po sila pinapayagan. And also, Secretary, this is a plea from our OFWs. Most of them are almost crying in the consular offices because they were not given a good how shall we say, a good welcome. Parang ang tipo na suplado daw ang ating mga consular offices staff and personnel. And I said to them that saan pa po tayo hihingi ng tulong kung hindi sa ating mga kababayan? Kaya plea mula po sa OFW party list na sana po now I understood kasi yung one personal post for every 7,000 OF or OFWs is really unimaginable. But please, siguro po mapapaintindi natin sa kanila na distress na po ito, mahirap na rin po ang buhay, medyo kahit konting pang-unawa, dagdagan na lang natin. And I'm sure na magkakaroon po na magandang pangyayari na maaari madagdagan ng ating budget to be able to cope sa konting-konting personnel post, lalo na po sa mga consular offices natin abroad. And one thing po that I would like to ask, Secretary, is that there is no posting of any consular local Filipino sa Pakistan. We have OFWs there. Wala daw pong Filipino, kundi Pakistani ang mga nasa office natin sa embassy sa Pakistan. And I would like to say na I once communicated with DFA, ang sagot po, Mr. Secretary, correct me if I'm wrong, ang sabi po ay wala ho kasing gustong pumunta sa Pakistan. I do not know how true is that. It's my office that called po ang DFA. And then tungkol naman po dito sa ating protection po ng ating promotion of the welfare of the OFWs and the protection of our rights ng OFWs, tinutuloy ko na po para diretso na rin po yung sagot. Yung budget po natin na almost 1.3 billion, pwede ho bang malaman, ma-itemize ang programs and activities natin dito? Of course, we know the repatriation, nandoon na po yung, yung assistance that we can offer. But ang reason po, kaya ko po hinihingi ito ay para po maibahagi natin sa ating mga OFWs at mga OFs. Karamihan po kasi sa kanila ay nai-stranded. Like I went to Indonesia 3 days ago, basta po nung over the weekend, I visited almost 90 plus na stranded po sa Bali, Indonesia. They were promised of a job sa Japan. They were recruited by a Filipino recruiter mula po sa Malaysia. And they were able to call our office in Indonesia, humihingi po ng trabaho. But how can we hire them when they have no legal papers? But they came to us for an assistance, and we did communicate with the Embassy of Indonesia, and they were saying that they were promised, 1 minute lang po, they were promised that they will be given or paid yung 70,000 pesos na kinuha sa kanila. I hope this is true. Thank you so much, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Secretary.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Perhaps I could ask our Undersecretary for Migrant Workers to respond to the various points raised by the Honorable Congresswoman. Just one point on the Pakistan. Perhaps we could get some information on that, because as far as I know, our embassy in Islamabad is manned by Filipino. Perhaps it could be one of our honorary consulates in Pakistan, which we have an honorary consul manning that with their own staff. So that's normally a national. But in the Islamabad, we have Filipino to head the consular office. But anyway, let me give the floor to Undersecretary De Vega.
Undersecretary. Undersecretary De Vega, sorry.
De Vega po.
Recognize.
Magandang hapon po. All right, Madam. The first thing I was doing now, Madam, was calling our chargé d'affaires in Pakistan, Miss Agnes Cervantes, who is a beautiful Filipina like yourself, Madam.
Thank you po.
Her answer, Sir, good afternoon. Viber calls from abroad cannot be accessed when in Pakistan. All right, we shall try WhatsApp later, and I shall have your talk to you, Madam. In fact, as I was discussing with you earlier, we would be quite thrilled to continue our engagement with you. I'm sure the Filipino community will be quite thrilled when you visit them, as you discuss, and our posts will certainly be willing and eager to assist you in that. Madam, you ask, before we go to that, we ask more to that, we ask about the status of the Assistance to Nationals Fund. Kanina po, sabi ni Secretary, there was about, I believe it was either the 52% as of August 26, ang utilization ng 1 billion peso ATN fund. Actually, In the past 4 days, umakyat na, it's 55%, 54.92. So we still have 45% for the last 5 months or so of the year. Magagastos po yan kasi marami pong chartered flights ang binubook po. As for the legal assistance fund, it's 200 million pesos. We have spent 46% as of August 30. Now, it may look, well, hindi nyo magagastos po lahat. Usually, we're able to spend at least 90% of it. But we look at it as another way. Na the Legal Assistance Fund and the Assistance to Nationals Fund are like an emergency fund. It's always good to have an extra amount. Kasi po, we don't know. I certainly hope I'm not stepping on the toes of my boss, my secretary. We have various situations. We have COVID. Mamayang konti, alam natin yung Russia-Ukraine. Baka magkaroon ng need for massive repatriation. It's always good to have ATN funds. Now, we know that the DMW will have their own action fund. But we cannot act na pagpunta doon, punta kayo doon. Kung sino mo muna pupuntahan, we will provide the assistance. So that explains it, ma'am. As for the kaugalian, ating mga MC, I guarantee you, we will always make sure that our embassies and consulate staff will treat them with due respect. After all, they are our kababayans. In fact, why don't we have Zoom meetings with our heads of posts? We could arrange that eventually, no? Yung tungkol dyan po sa ATN, well, they are the heroes. We also have to be heroes in the DFA. I give you an example, madam. I mentioned kanina na may right now we just repatriated 22 Filipinos from Sri Lanka, no? We paid their flights. Well, we have an embassy in Nairobi. They're ready to go to assist somebody, a Filipino dentist in Somaliland. Yun hindi magagawa po ng DMW. They have no post. And they're waiting, where they have the funds, but they have to go there. They need the fund, so provided it from the ATN funds kasi kailangan kasama armored truck. They were supposed to go recently, but the hotel where they were going to go has been taken over by some mercenaries. So again, so we're going to do what we can. Shall we say we're going to go there, help the Filipino dentist, and if need be, extract the Filipino dentist from Somaliland if necessary. So shall we say, yung inyong ATN fund, we cannot perform these operations without anesthesia. Kailangan yung anesthesia is the ATN funds, the LA funds. There's the DMW. The Filipino OFWs need to know that when the Congress passed the DMW law, it wasn't cosmetic. In other words, there's an impetus to provide more help. So we can't have the same budget separated between DFA and DMW. We'll have our own. They'll have their own. That's a sign that it's not the same pie. It's a bigger pie. Madam, anytime. Guess who's calling? This is the DFA. Agnes Cervantes po. Madam Agnes Cervantes. Ilang kayong Filipino dyan sa Islamabad? Embassy.
Yusek to the Vega.
Yes, thank you po. Kinakamusta niyo po kayo?
Speaker.
Okay.
Is it possible?
Okay, so po, well, I had to cut it because the vice chairman. We'll keep in touch, madam. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. Thank you so much, Yusek De Vega. We'll keep in touch. Definitely, we'll do more. Thank you so much. Thank you, Secretary Manalo.
Thank you very much, Yusek De Vega, and thank you very much, Representative Magsino. I think you requested for some documents to be submitted in this committee.
Mr. Chair.
May I request the DFA to submit all those documents requested by Representative Magsino. Next to interpolate from majority, Representative Margo from Baguio.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, Mr. Secretary, and the other officers of DFA. I would like to ask, especially our Yusek Morales. I've heard a lot of your concerns, especially the budget in particular. I would like to know how much is your recommended budget to the Department of Budget and Management? Magkano ang recommend niyo at magkano ang nasama sa NEP of course, you mentioned kanina yung SANEP, but how much is the difference between what you have submitted and the approved NEP budget? Mga magkano po? Let's just be fast with the answer. Oo.
Yes, Yusek Morales.
Maraming salamat po. Sa akin pong recollection, we asked for 42 billion po. We were given 20 point something billion. Kalahati po ang naibigay sa hiningi namin.
So, nung pong binigay sa inyo yung budget na yan, Mr. Chair, kayo po ba ay pumunta ulit sa DBM at kinwestiyon nyo yung kanilang sinama na budget? At ano po ang sabi nila?
Pagkatapos po ng sinabit namin yung aming proposal na nagkakahalaga ng 42 bilyon na ibinigay sa amin ay kalahati lang, kulang sa kalahati, 20 point something billion. Kami po ay sumulat sa DFA po si Secretary Manalo ng rekonsiderasyon na maaari ba nilang tignan uli ang aming panukala po ng budget, pero hindi po naging matagumpay yung aming hiling.
Opo. Ganito po kasi yun, ako po nakipag-usap sa mga ibang opisyal ng DBM at ang total recommended budget ng lahat ng mga agencies of government ay mahigit pong 13 trillion. 13 trillion. Ang na-approve po ng Malacanang, which is reflected in the NEP, is 5.268 trillion. So kung bibigay po yung lahat ng request ng lahat ng mga departamento, ang magiging budget po natin ay magiging 13 trillion. Sa ganang akin po, hindi po kaya ng ating bansa ang 13 trillion. Manguutang po tayo ng mahigit na 9 trillion, which is almost 60% to 70% of our current borrowings ngayon na mahigit na 12 trillion. So, doon po sa request ninyo, meron po bang yung talagang must na kailangan ninyo? At kung hindi nyo makuha yan, hindi nyo magagawa ang inyong trabaho. Meron po ba? Magkano po yun? Yung talagang kaya nyong gawin yung trabaho po natin. And yung sabi ko nga kanina, tinanong ko yung isang departamento, yung barest minimum. Opo, sige po. Madam Chair, Mr. Chair.
With the permission of the Honorable.
Yes, Yusek Morales.
Sabihin mo lang yung amount para alam mas mabilis tayo. Huwag mo nang i-detalye. I just want to...
Sige po. Kung naintindihan naman po natin, naunawaan natin na talagang mahirap humingi ng malaking pondo. Pero ang amin pong hiling ay mula 42 billion, 20 billion ang binigay. Ang hiling po namin ay 2.2 billion. Ano po itong mga ito? 1, 2, 3, 4 na bagay po. One is the increase of the building fund. Kailangan po natin. Kung kayo po ay bumisita sa DFA, napakaluma na rin ng ating gusali. At pag lumilindol, ay gumagalaw na siya ng parang hindi na po safe. So, at
So,
saka
capital outlay po. Capital outlay.
1.389 billion po yon. Ang pangalawa po ay ang e-passport. Ang e-passport po, na nagkakahalaga ng 544 million at ang ating pong, yung sinabi ko po kanina, yung mga temporary off-site passport services sa mga malls na nagkakahalaga po ng 136.7 million. At ang kahuli-hulihan po ay budget ng bagong buong opisina na Office of Civilian Security na 6 million. At ang huli po ay yung budget po ng sahod ng mga local hires sa ating embassies at konsulado.
So ang inihingi po nyo is about additional between 2 to 3 billion pesos from your current approved NEP budget.
Yun po ang
Tama
aming
po yun.
hinihiling.
So yun po, ito pong representation ito, ako po ay magmamanifest during the plenary discussion po ng budget ninyo na dagdagan ng 3 bilyong piso para po yung pong gusto nyong gawin ay magagawa ninyo at sisiguraduhin natin na kayo ay magdi-deliver ng magandang serbisyo sa ating pong mga kababayan.
Marami pong salamat.
Last question na lang po. Ang inyo pong sinasabi niyong revenues from consular offices. Ito pong taong ito, 2022, you are expected to collect more than 2 billion. Ano po? Tama po ba yon? Tama po yon. Yung pera pong yan, direktamente pumupunta sa National Treasury or ito po ay naiwan sa DFA?
Ang katotohanan po, lahat po ng koleksyon ng DFA ay napupunta po sa National Treasury at ang amin pong budget ay binibigay sa amin po ng.
So
Yun
kung
po
yung pong provision na yan ay mailipat sa DFA, yung pondong nakokolekta ninyo, wala na kayong problema. Ang ibig sabihin po niyan. Kasi
Malagay ko
magagamit po
po,
nyo.
kung tinignan po natin yung ating presentasyon, mas malaki pa rin po ang kailangan namin kaysa sa koleksyon. Pero kaunti na lang po ang diferensya.
Opo. So titingnan po namin yan kung paano po natin maiayos kung kailangan ng batas para ma-address po natin yan. So yun lang po. Maraming salamat at magandang hapon pa sa inyong lahat.
Maraming salamat, Representative Go. Before we go on, may I request the family of DFA to answer the questions briefly but directly and concise. So because we are time constrained, almost 6 na, no? So our next interpolator from the minority, Representative Raul Manuel.
Magandang hapon, Mr. Chair, at sa ating mga panauhin sa Department of Foreign Affairs. Yung mga tanong ko ay mga issues na inline dun sa mandate ng ating departamento. Unahin ko na po yung tungkol sa ating relations with the International Criminal Court. Kasi di ba gusto nitong i-resume yung probe sa anti-poor na drug war ni dating Pangulong Rodrigo Duterte. And as of July, ang banggit ng ating DFA ay nasa proseso ito ng pag-coordinate sa iba pang mga government agencies. And yung ICC din nanghingi ng mga observations, no? Inline dun sa kanyang probe request. And publicly, na-mention din na DFA is already aware of this. So ngayon na almost isang buwan na yung lumipas, we'd like to ask kung may update na about this.
Mr. Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is on the human rights or the ICC?
ICC,
Ah,
yeah.
It's on the ICC. Of course, we are quite aware of that, and naturally, first let me say that of course the Philippines is not a member of the ICC, and is no longer a member. But our position has always been dun sa ICC is even if we were not a member, is that it's the jurisdiction of the ICC. I think the ICC comes in normally for grave offenses or humanitarian or genocide, mga ganun. And only if the courts or the legal system of a country is clearly not working. And we've always made that clear, that the judicial system of the Philippines is quite alive and working well, and it does exist. Ngayon, kaya nga, it's the problem is that ICC tries to sometimes get into issues on countries na clearly have working judicial systems. We really feel the ICC, and it's there in its mandate, comes in if a country is no longer able to, or is unwilling, or is unable to really undertake any kind of judicial investigation. So parang ang ano namin is the ICC should stick to its mandate.
Yeah. So Mr. Chair, dun sa nabanggit na yung ating judicial systems are working, I'd like to be honest na sa matter na yon, di po tayo nag-agree, lalo na't ilang taon na rin yung lumipas, tapos libo-libo ng mga pamilya yung nangihingi din ng hustisya no, dun sa mga nangyari sa kanila no, as part of the drug war. No. Next, point, Mr. Chair, tungkol naman sa West Philippine Sea. No? Gusto ko lang ipagpatuloy din yung naging discussion kanina na nasimulan na. I'd like to inquire kung ano yung grounds na ating pagiging bukas dun sa joint exploration ng West Philippine Sea with China, given na hanggang sa ngayon ay dinedenay pa rin nila yung kanilang legal claim sa yung legal claim pala natin. No? Patuloy na dinedenay ng China yung ating claim sa West Philippine Sea. Yeah,
Yes,
ano
Mr.
yung
Secretary.
basis natin for openness?
Sandler. Dun sa oil and gas, I think.
Yeah, yung joint
The
exploration.
joint. Yeah, well, ang nangyari dyan is actually, if I could just go back dun on the history, the recent history of oil and gas, kasi matagal na nang pinag-usapan yan. But in 2018, during a state visit of President Xi Jinping dito sa Pilipinas, we signed an MOU on oil and gas exploration. And dun sa MOU na yan, there was a provision clearly stating that any activity entered into between a Chinese company, I think Sinuk sa China, and the Filipino company, Pinoc or Forum, would be subject to the conditions stated in the service contract, kasi those companies in the Philippines have service contracts. So yun ang na-agreehan. When we had our first negotiation with China, and that service contract, to be very simple, one of the key provisions is any sharing will be 60-40, 60 Philippines, 40 China. When we started negotiating with them, in the end, hindi sila pumapayag dun sa 60-40. So, hindi rin kami pumapayag when the 60-40. So the negotiations did not prosper. Then nag-negotiate na naman sila recently last year. This year. And ganun din nangyari. Not only the 60-40, but China also attached other conditions which were in accordance with Chinese law. Hindi rin makakapayag ang Pilipinas doon, nor did they accept Philippine law. So those negotiations ended, walang agreement, and as of now, nothing has happened. But as I said earlier, we have indicated to China our willingness to continue or to reopen talks sa oil and gas, kasi we realized na especially now, yung energy crunch, tsaka yung nangyayari around the world, we really have to develop our resources. But again, if we enter into negotiations with China, we will be guided by our laws and our constitution.
Yeah. Kung hindi 60-40 yung pinapayagan ng China, Mr. Chair, ano yung kanilang gustong hatian?
Well, actually, ang gusto nila, just to put simply, 50-50 or 51-49, pero hindi rin pwede kasi that's a natural resource. So sa ngayon, that's where it stands. But we're open, and let's see, maybe China will come back with a more open mind. Tingnan natin. There might be ways of, but we're bound by the Constitution.
Yeah. 51% in favor of China.
Well, nagpalit-palit sila when I was there, no? They first said 51-49, pero baka willing sila na 50-50. Pero hindi pa rin pwede.
Okay. Kaya ako binutput din, Mr. Chair, kasi ako, I really want to be very careful no, dun sa kung paano papasok yung ating bansa sa ganung mga deals, given nga yung position pa rin ng China. And with all due respect sa parties concerned, para kasi sa akin, if I were to have an analogy, yung China parang kapitbahay natin na inaangkin yung ilang mga kagamitan sa ating bahay. Tapos, instead na on the lookout tayo sa pagpasok niya, parang bukas pa tayo na mag-enter siya, tutulungan pa natin na maghanap kung ano yung pwede niyang kunin at saan niya yun kukunin sa ating bahay. So yun yung pagtingin ko dun sa issue, kaya marapat talaga na sa pag-proceed natin dito ay tintiyak natin yung sovereignty ng ating bansa at hindi lang lip service yung ating gawin on this matter. Now, my final question would be about the case of Apollo Kibuloy. Kasi sa FBI, sa US, wanted siya for sex trafficking by force, fraud and coercion, sex trafficking of children, conspiracy, and bulk cash smuggling. So, gusto kong magtanong kung may idea po ba yung DFA bakit hanggang ngayon wala pa rin yung extradition request galing sa US? Kasi may kaso na siya at kung gusto talaga nilang maaresto siya, based on the PH-US extradition treaty, dapat sila yung mag-send ng request na yun sa atin. So ano po yung update doon?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. May I request Yusek De Vega?
Yusek De Vega, you're recognized.
Salamat po. Tama po kayo. Dapat sa Philippine-US Extradition Treaty, silang una mag-request. Pero, we have the ASEC for Legal Affairs as well here. As of now, we don't have the request. And hindi rin natin gagawin na tayo magsasabi sa US, request.
Yeah.
Request the extradition of one of our citizens. So, in fact, that is one reason under the extradition treaty with the US and other extradition treaties to deny a request. If it's your own citizen that you will send to the other country, you have the option to deny it, to deny the request. But of course, wala pang request. So
Yeah.
we'll see.
Kasi nagtataka din tayo, this has already dragged on for months. Tapos kung seryoso din yung US na i-hold accountable si Apollo Kibuloy, dapat nagpadala na siya ng request. In line with that, no, gusto kong malaman din mula sa DFA kasi nagbabanta din si Apollo Kibuloy. To quote, ito sabi niya nung November, yung persecution daw sa kanya will lead to diseases worse than Omicron. Tapos to quote, kung gusto daw nating matigil yung pandemya, itigil natin yung persecution sa kanya. So, gusto ko lang malaman, does this affect the position of DFA? Natatakot ba kayo sa ganong threat?
Anyone from the DFA?
Sir, well, we cannot speak for Pastor Kibuloy, no?
But are you threatened? Kasi daw, ganun lalala yung pandemya if anyone will act on this case. And that includes the DFA.
Filipino Foreign Service officers are always brave to challenge, to respond to any challenge. We're not afraid.
Okay, I'm pleased to hear that. Kasi actually, kung papakinggan nga yun, di ba, yung sinabi na yun, it sounds like a joke, but it's not a joke for him. Seryoso siya doon. No? Kaya at least panatag ako na marinig yon sa ating DFA na hindi sila natatakot sa ganong banta.
But if I may, Your Honor, no? Kasi po, the DFA is just like, ang role namin sa extradition is like, what do you say? I don't want to say post office, no? It's the DOJ which processes these requests, tapos dadampa yun sa court, sa RTC, to process it. And we're the ones who pass it on, no? So we're not, anyway, basta, when it comes, sir,
Yeah.
we'll certainly update you on it.
Yeah, at least gagampanan nyo kung ano man yung papel nyo in line dun sa proseso. Yes, that would be all, Madam, Mr. Chair. Maraming salamat.
Thank you very much, Representative Manuel. Our next, from the majority, via Zoom, Representative Luistro. You are now recognized. Representative Luistro.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair. Well, allow me to share my similar apprehension to my fellow colleagues. And as far as our concern with the West Philippine Sea is concerned, may I just know from our Department Secretary, ano po ba ang actual status sa West Philippine Sea? Is it a status quo or does China continue to advance their occupation towards Philippine territory?
Mr. Secretary.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Do you want to answer this? Yeah, could I ask our Assistant Secretary for Maritime Affairs to reply?
Assistant Secretary Ponce, you're recognized.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon. On the status quo of what we have in the West Philippine Sea, what we have are we get the way we get them first is that we get reports from our enforcement agencies, from the Coast Guard, from the Navy, on the presence of of Chinese vessels or Vietnam or other vessels of other countries in our territories. And normally we have these weekly reports, but there is still presence of Chinese vessels in the West Philippine Sea, whether they be Coast Guard vessels or fishing vessels or maritime militia. We have them there, and normally our enforcement agencies, our Coast Guard and Navy, are there and to monitor them. Thank you.
As a follow-up question, Mr. Chair, does the presence of the Chinese vessel advance towards Philippine territory? Sila po ba'y lalong lumalapit sa territorial jurisdiction ng ating bansa?
Asik Ponce.
Thank you, Chair. Per the reports of our Coast Guard, they have gone. There are instances where, of course, they're always inside our EEZ, and there are instances where they have entered our territorial sea. But normally, the presence is normally in the EEZ. Thank you.
If I may appeal to the Department of Foreign Affairs, I acknowledge your efforts in seeking for the recognition of the arbitral ruling on UNCLOS in favor of the Philippine government. However, we have to determine if the Chinese occupation is a status quo or if they continue to advance their occupation towards our territory, because that would explain the inclination or behavior of the Chinese government towards the West Philippine issue. In spite of their efforts, if they continue to advance their occupation towards Philippine territory, it is a sign or indication that there is no hope at all of recognizing this arbitral ruling from the end of the Chinese government. And of course, I heard earlier about the explanation of our department secretary on the negotiations on the bilateral level, the regional level, as well as on the level of the UN General Assembly. I just wish to ask, suppose all these negotiations from 3 levels did not materialize, what remaining options does the Philippine government have?
Mr. Secretary.
Thank you. Well, I think that these are ongoing. As long as there is a situation, we will continue. And I think, for example, one example at the regional level is the continuing negotiations between the Asean and China on a code of conduct with the South China Sea. And that is continuing. And in fact, negotiations are ongoing. So I believe this situation is fluid. The Philippines will never give up its rights, never give up its position. As long as China continues this, we will not stop. And if the situation is fluid, then we will react to that. But I think we will not accept the situation as it is, and we will continue to do so. Of course, the DFA has its limits in our mandate, but we are also working with the other agencies like Department of Defense and other and the Philippine Navy Coast Guard to see how we can do it. And as I mentioned, even our partners, our treaty partner, for example, the United States, we're also discussing further joint activities with Japan and also with Australia. And even the EU, some countries, UK and France, are now also exerting a presence. And we even had talks with India last year on this for naval. So I think we will respond. Of course, the Philippines cannot respond alone. So we will need to contact our partners to help us in that respect. So I would say the situation, the Philippines is continuously acting to this, and we're not accepting the situation as a kind of status quo. But we will, of course, take into account the concerns the Honorable Congresswoman has expressed. I think they're correct. That's why we have to remain vigilant at all times.
Yes, Mr. Chair. I just wish to express that I hope that we will be very much cautious on exerting all these efforts so that it will not trigger the Chinese government on commencing a war with the Philippine government, because definitely, certainly, absolutely, we are not in the position to engage in a war. So let me just appeal to all this concern that I hope the necessary caution is being employed in exerting all these efforts towards claiming our sovereignty over the West Philippine Sea. Mr. Chair, for my next question, since the pandemic started, there has been a difficulty in securing or even applying for visa to foreign countries. May we know from the Department of Foreign Affairs if they do extend service on matters concerning this visa application and renewal to foreign countries?
Mr. Secretary. Yes, Mr. Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, the issuance of visa is the sovereign right of the issuing country, and it's already accepted in international law that any attempt to, let's say, influence a sovereign right could constitute interference in sovereign affairs. And I realize the problem, but from the point of the Philippines, if a country tries to influence us on issuing a visa, we will also react accordingly. So I think, unfortunately, we're unable to intervene on those kind of matters.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. Representative Luis.
With that, Mr. Chair, may I proceed to my last interpellation?
Kindly wind up.
Yes, we've been hearing the services of DFA in our earlier discussion. In very brief and simple answer, how do we draw the line between the services of DFA, DOLE, and DMW in as far as the Filipinos abroad are concerned? Because I believe that a very clear understanding as to the matters covered by the three agencies are concerned need to be intimated or communicated clearly to our countrymen abroad.
Yusek De Vega, you're recognized.
Good afternoon. Yes, we need to intimate that. At present, the DMW is still being operationalized, although you could see that they are already active. So for now, it's still the DFA with the lead role for overseas Filipinos. The law passed by Congress, Madam, is Republic Act 11641. And there are Filipino nationals not covered by the DMW, those who are immigrants in the host country, those who are permanent residents of the host country, those who are citizens of the host country, but Filipino descent, or originally Filipino, those awaiting naturalization, recognition, or admission to another country. Filipino nationals who are engaged under a government-recognized exchange visitor program. And lastly, Filipino nationals who are not engaged in remunerative activities. In other words, are not really there to work. For example, Filipino spouses of foreign citizens. So yung mga yon, sa amin pa rin po ang responsibility, no? So that's the way we distinguish it. And also, at present, if there are no labor attaches in a certain place, then the DFA will have to be responsible for all the Filipinos there. And we do we always try to comply with our responsibilities.
Yes, Mr. Chair, may I just suggest to DFA that we come up with a very simple and clear guidelines, which we can post perhaps to the website of various to all Filipinos abroad as to which office they will proceed depending on the concerns that they are addressing. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Representative Luistro. Thank you very much, Yusek De Vega. Next from the minority, Representative Arlene Rosas.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Maraming salamat po. Magandang gabi po sa inyong lahat. Yung question ko po, balikan ko lang yung sa DMW, saka kasi parang may overlap sa functions nung DMW Department of Migrant Workers under the Action Fund at saka yung ATN or yung Assistant to Nationals. Ano po bang pagkakaiba nila?
O kape o.
Yusek De Vega, you're recognized. Actually po, wala pong main difference, wala pong talagang kababayan difference. Ngunit kung sino ang tinatarget, yung mga workers po, ang mga Filipino na pupunta sa ibang bansa para magtrabaho, kahit na undocumented, sabi ng Department of Migrant Workers, i-handle nila yun. Sa kanila yon. Lahat ng ibang Filipinos, hawak ng Assistance Nationals Fund. So, isa pa yung sa Legal Assistance Fund, kasi in reality po, pag may kaso ang Filipinos abroad, or kung siyang hindi siya kinasuhan, siya yung biktima, the host authorities usually listen more or would rather deal with the consuls, with the DFA officers, rather than labor officers. Not that they don't listen to our labor representatives, but usually kasama ng mga consuls. So specifically for legal assistance, it's really more for the DFA. No? Everything under the one country team approach, yung ambassador, yung consul general, yung head ng post. No? So yun, the main difference is who is benefited. And DMW, it's very clear under the definition yung OFW na those going abroad to particularly work.
Pero ibig sabihin nun, kailangan pareho. Tama, no? Yung Action Fund at saka yung ATN Fund. Yung
Definitely
ATN
po.
Fund, definitely, hindi natin dapat bawasan. Tama ba?
Definitely po. Salamat po.
Yun, kasi we have noticed the allocation for the Assistant to National Fund, has been trimmed from 8.9 billion for 8.9 billion to 8.5 billion for next year, for 2023. Tama po ba?
Ma'am, I wish po 8.9 billion, but it's 1 billion, ma'am. 1 billion. Since 2018,
Okay.
palaging
1
1 billion. Yung legal assistance is 200 million. It's steady at that.
1 billion lang. So, it was retained by the DFA. Tama?
Opo, under section 14 of the law. No. Madam, baka sa DMW yung 8.9 billion because sa amin 1.1 billion pa.
Oo, baka ATN, 1 billion lang. Grabe. But sa dami ng problema ng overseas Filipinos at saka issues, no? Sa mga political and economic instability sa maraming bansa, 1 billion lang yung direct na nabibigay natin, no? Yun yung sinasabi ninyo eh. Ang current allocation niya ay 1 billion.
Opo.
Grabe. Tapos, ano pong mga problema nung ating mga kung 1 billion lang, sumasapat po ba ito? Hindi po ba ang alam ko po kasi ang mga migrant workers at saka hindi lang migrant workers, no? Even kahit mga individuals talaga, no, na overseas Filipinos, marami sa kanila namumroblema din at kailangan talaga nila ng pondo na ito. Wala po bang effort na dagdagan, sabihan na madagdagan itong pondo ng ATN?
Well, ma'am, salamat po. Salamat po, madam. I wish all representatives thought like you, madam, all the DFA. Kasi po, we were just hoping na hindi mas-slash yung 1 billion kasi meron ng DMW. And to hear an ally na kung pwede madagdagan is very, very heartwarming for us in the DFA. But actually po, we think with the creation of DMW, I think 1 billion might be sufficient. But kasi meron pang transition committee. And we still have to make the final guidelines paano magdi-distribute kami ng responsibilities within DMW and DFA. So what we're thinking of is that for next year, i-retain yung 1 billion and then we'll see how it goes. Tapos for the future year after that, baka kailangan iakyat. Kasi as I was saying kanina, merong anything can happen, no? I hope it's not a war or what, no? What we usually do is try to utilize at least 90% of it kasi so why not 100%? Kasi sometimes we try to have some extra just in case may bigla lang mangyari towards the end of the year na kailangan bigla mag-mass repatriation. Now, to give you an example, paano nagagastos, ma'am? Medical assistance, kunya, welfare assistance, and mga ayuda, for example. Kunyari, hindi lang namin binigyan ng tickets yung mga ibang Filipino sa Sri Lanka, for example. May pumunta pang team from Bangladesh, yung US Embassy, para magbigay ng ayuda
to about 500 Filipinos there. So repatriation, shipment of remains, so
Sa in-house counselors para mag-provide ng psychosocial services, kasama yan doon.
no, that's sa
Iba pang pondo po
ibang
yan.
pondo po yun. And
Sa pag-utilize ng legal assistance fund, iba pa yung legal assistance fund.
usually these are, madam, for mga lawyers na binabayaran natin.
Yes, magkano yung allocated for that?
200 million po.
200 million lang. Sapat ba yun?
Actually, so far we're able to use the 200 million, but there was a time that it was 400 million. And maybe the future will ask 400 million. Pero the good news na now the expenditure is less might mean that, Filipinos are able now to more use the local lawyers, and also the actions being done by the department to advance migration rights through our seminars or participation in international conferences. It might be bearing fruit, no? Kaya po nababawasan yung utilization legal assistance fund, no? So there's also the medical repatriation. Kunyari, just the other day, I remember signing a few approvals. Kunyari, sometimes umaabot ng $80,000 or $90,000 to medically repatriate one person. Ganun po, ma'am.
So, Mr. Vice Chair, ito pong case na ito ng ATN, actually, kailangan po talaga natin tong dagdagan yung pondo na to eh. Kasi ito po talaga ang nakikinabang yung mga overseas Filipinos natin. Direkta po sa kanila. Sabi nga kanina, medical, ayuda, etc. Tapos there are migrant groups, no, na nag-urge talaga sa ating national government na itong ATN ay malagyan, no, ng pondo at hindi dapat mabawasan. Lalong-lalo na itong 2023 budget. On to my next question po, kaugnay dito sa Filipinos in death row overseas. Meron po kasing, ilan na po ba yung nasa death row sa atin?
Yes, ma'am. There are actually 65 death row death cases, no? But the majority of them are either under appeal pa, or are in countries where there is a moratorium on the implementation death penalty, such as Malaysia.
Yes, speaking of Malaysia po, ilan po ang nandyan?
32? You mean death penalty, no?
32 cases
Yes.
sa death row.
Yes, but let me, I will give you, fine, I can tell you, ma'am, it's 32, but I'll give the
Sa
exact
akin po
figure
kasi ang
later.
nakalagay sa akin na note, 62 are in Malaysia.
Oh, really? Madam? Death row cases.
Tama ba yan? Tapos halos kalahati sa death row, nasa death row, no? Kalahati ay kababaihan.
Opo, pero 62 are in Malaysia. We'll compare notes, ma'am, kasi yung aming data is 65 worldwide. I'm sorry, ma'am. There, 33 in Malaysia.
Sa akin po kasi 62 facing death row, 11 potential death row cases, 49 out of 62 are in Malaysia, 14 in Saudi Arabia. And hingi po sana ako ng update dito. Now, if wala pa po dyan, may I request Mr. Vice Chair to the official report on the status of Filipinos facing death row in different jurisdictions and yung mga interventions po na ginawa ng Philippine government.
Kindly submit those documents to this committee.
Yes, po. And there's also a semi-annual report to Congress that we submit into
Yes, please.
Yung mga cases po, 37% smuggling and trafficking, mainly sa Malaysia. Tapos, hindi ba't yung mga potential na kaso na ito katulad ng hinaharap ni Mary Jane Veloso? Ano po yung mga hakbang na ginawa ng DFA para sagipin yung kababayan or particular kay Mary Jane Veloso po?
From the beginning po, I remember I was and the ASEC Bensurto were there, in the evening. That was an evening of 2014, I believe it was, when nandun kami sa war room namin sa DFA, and we were able to stop at the very, very last moment yung execution because nasama siya with other people. No? So, we continue to, well, there is a case that has been filed for illegal recruitment, and that is one way that we are able to ask the Indonesians to hold muna the any execution of the penalty, kasi we're trying to show that she was a victim, not a perpetrator. But as for other hakbangs, ano po, si Secretary?
Mr. Secretary.
Thank you. No, I just wanted to add dito sa case ni Mary Jane Veloso. She's in Indonesia now. Next week, the delegation will be going there. We will most likely raise this issue with the Indonesian officials and our concerns on this. And so just to assure the Honorable Congresswoman that this issue is going to be one of those we will raise during the state visit.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vice Chair. Mr. Vice Chair, last question ko, kaugnay po ito. At salamat po, Secretary, dun sa sagot ninyo na pupunta ang delegation. And please update us, lalo na sa Kongreso, kung ano yung nangyayari sa mga cases na ito. Katulad ng kay Mary Jane Veloso. And the other, this is very alarming, kasi kung meron tayong 65 cases, tapos ano na yung mga updates doon sa mga death row cases natin na yan. Nakaka-alarma po sa atin yon. Tapos most of them are women, lalo na yung sa Malaysia. We would like to be updated kung ano yung nagaganap doon. And lastly, Mr. Vice Chair, yung niretain ba yung 200 allocation for Presidential Oversight Program? Tama ba yung detail ko dito? 200 million ba ito? Previously, we were told that this covered the expenses related to the review of the Visiting Forces Agreement, VFA po. Will the Marcos Jr. administration pursue a new review of the VFA? Ano po ang foreign policy attitude natin sa VFA?
Anyone from the DFA?
Una, yung amount po, tinanong ko, 200 million. Is this retained? Sa Presidential Oversight Program. Second, ano po yung policy attitude ng DFA sa Visiting Forces Agreement?
Yes, Mr. Secretary.
Well, thank you. On the second question on the Visiting Forces Agreement, it has not changed. Our policy remains the same as in the previous administration on the Visiting Forces Agreement. And but nevertheless, it is not. We are in constant talks with the United States to determine whether there's a need to revise, etc., or expand or whatever. But the basic policy remains the same. Dun sa on the amount of 200 million, unfortunately, our representative from the EUSEC, Ramuanga, is not here in the VFA. Perhaps I could get back on that amount. If that's okay, we will check with him and then send the figure to you.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Vice Chair. I have so many questions po sa Department of Foreign Affairs. Sa plenary na lang po siguro, and I would like to get yung all na mga details sa mga ni-request ko po. And as a final manifestation, Mr. Vice Chair, we in Gabriela Party List remains firm in asserting a genuine independent foreign policy rather than subscribing to the friend to all attitude as mentioned ninyo po kanina sa President Marcos, sabi nyo in his first SONA. Kailangan pong sinserong tindigan ang paggigiit ng soberanya natin at huwag pahintulutang magamit ang bansa sa geopolitical na interes ng sinumang foreign power. Higit sa lahat, kailangan po nating totohanin ng administration na ito ang umano'y pagpapahalaga sa ating overseas Filipino workers. Doblehin ang budget natin para sa assistance to nationals at tiyakin ang epektibo at komprehensibong serbisyo sa ating mga kababayan na humihingi ng saklolo sa ibang bansa. Maraming salamat, Mr. Vice Chair. Maraming salamat, Mr. Secretary.
Salamat din, Representative Rosas. Next in line, my co-sponsor, Representative Vice Chair Abante.
Magandang hapon po. Magandang hapon. Magandang hapon. Magandang gabi na ata. Na meron lang ako isang tanong, and then afterwards I'd like to make a manifestation. No? And the only question I would like to ask is this: what is your thought, briefly, no? What is your thought on the ruling that a European court gave the Sultan of Sulu? What is your thought on that?
Anyone from DFA?
Well, it's of course the initial interpretation, and of course the what we know is that it is a ruling. It's a private ruling. That's definite, and therefore it's really a matter between those who filed the claim and those and I believe the Malaysian government. So it's really an issue between them.
So, Mr. Chair, we're not going to make an official statement of that.
Well, at the moment, there are no plans, but we are studying the implications of possibly making a statement, because this is a little bit complicated because it's a private. If that had been a government, it's another story. But since it's private claim, there could be many implications. So if we do make any statement, naturally we have to weigh whether that will reflect on our claim, Philippines, or whether it will have no effect, and the other factors like our bilateral relations. So just to say that at the moment, I understand the Office of the Solicitor General is in fact studying this, and we will probably, once they come up with some kind of understanding then or interpretation or assessment, then we will meet with them and discuss with them. Of course, it will not only be DFA. This also has a legal aspect, so OSG, DOJ, DFA. So that's where we stand now at this stage.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just would like to make a request to my colleagues that if there are any more questions to be asked, that they should now ask it in this committee hearing. So that because I'll be defending the budget about DFA, so both of us will, no. So would like to ask all of my colleagues to ask all the questions now, so that when it comes to the plenary, we will just make a request that you just make a manifestation. All right. And secondly, to our the family of the DFA, we would like to please give us a briefer of all of what perhaps the questions will be asked to us in advance. So we are going to study it because we're going to be the ones to answer it anyway. And I think that the question I asked of you will be asked in the plenary. So yun lang, Mr. Chair. Maraming salamat po.
Thank you very much, my co-sponsor. For the information of DFA, tatlo po kami, no? Representative Abante and Representative Puentabella, no? So, in case na magkakaroon ng briefing, tatlo ho kami mag-attend. Okay, next in line, Vice Chair Eric Martinez.
Thank you, Vice Chair, and our dear colleagues. I just would like, if this would be a family feud thing or a pop quiz and ask the common tao, what do they know about DFA? The answer would be passport. It's the most engaging activity that the common tao would try to reach about passport. So I just would like to be acquainted with the current state of our passporting system. First, the speed of application, the releasing of the said passport, how to get the speed of getting a schedule, and all those stuff that contributes to a hassle-free service of our passporting by the DFA. Please.
Secretary Manalo.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Could I perhaps request Assistant Secretary Bensurto to reply to that?
You're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the question, Your Honor. We are aware of the problems that cropped up during the pandemic that has created a logjam in terms of passport appointment and the difficulties that people underwent. And all of this we are now addressing step by step. So first, with respect to the logjam in the passport appointment, we have already undone the logjam. So there are more passport appointment slots right now. I just want to make clear that why was there an appointment system? Precisely because we are mindful of the time, the value of time for people. We don't want them to fall in line, in a long line, and spend many hours in the line. We would rather that they be there only at an appointed slot, essentially. So we don't want to waste their time. And that was precisely the reason behind the appointment system. However, we are cognizant that of the fact that there was a surge. And that being the case, we have opened also the courtesy lane where people can come as a walk-in applicants, provided they are on emergency basis, OFWs, pregnant, and persons with disabilities. To address this as well, we have opened, and thank you to Congress for helping us in this respect, in opening temporary passport offsite processing offices. And we now have 20 of that, in fact, that has also addressed the number of people wanting to have a passport. So let me just give the numbers, something like 500 passports are processed per temporary offsite, actually. And that being the case, we have 20, that's about 10,000. And in fact, if I may, that is also the concern for us in January, because the budget for this temporary offsite, inherently it was a congressional initiative. If our budget and that is not renewed, then these 20 offsite passport offices will disappear. That means about 10,000 people on a daily basis will be impacted by that closure. So that's the fear. However, at the moment, we are operating on that capacity. This obviously has helped us address the issue of number of people wanting to apply for passports. The other thing, with respect to the appointment system, we have also increased the number of slots. That being the case, there are fewer people who you will see falling in line. On a strategic basis, I think if for this to be sustainable, our sense is that on a strategic basis, I think it is more important for us, rather than centralizing all the applications in Metro Manila, we have to consider opening more consular offices distributed in the different regions and major cities of the country. By doing so, this will also fulfill our objective and our thrust to bring government closer to the people. Rather than waiting for them to come, we would rather that we go to them. So pursuant to this as well, we have implemented and we are pursuing the policy of doing mobile passport, essentially. So this is an operationalization of that mission thrust. And we have already set some guidelines to rationalize how we are going to do this. But obviously, all things considered, the consular offices, the temporary passport processing offices, the passport mobile, all of this will require resources, both in terms of the number of people, because every time we do passport mobile, we will have to pluck out people who are in the counters and put them on a team. So we were hoping that we can increase the mobile passport with the increase of the number of people. Finally, to your question, Your Honor, with respect to the days of processing, we are operating on the basis of 7 days regular I'm sorry, 14 days, 12 to 14 days, by which a passport is processed and released. And then there's an expedite process whereby you can get your passport within 7 days. Now, let me just explain. In the future, our objective is to cut the time, and we are looking at all possibilities. So when we are looking at the future, we're looking also of how to do this contactless passport, for example. I, for one, is going to explore with the ecosystem in San Francisco and talk with the startup community how to do an app in the phone, so that passport applications can be done by phone, so that biometrics can also be done. All of this in the context of providing security and integrity while delivering effective and efficient service to the public. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you very much for giving that comprehensive answer to a 30-second question. Would this budget be enough to satisfy the passporting services? Yes or no?
At the current level, given the reduction, Your Honor, it will not. In fact, it will severely impact our ability to deliver services.
Yeah, judging from the numbers, 10,000 passports a day in 20 working days, that's 200,000 displacement times 10 months, around 2 million passports, Madam Chair. So in line with that, as part of the majority, I would really insist there may be cuts, but in terms of the most engaging transaction of DFA passporting, I think the budget there should be restored to its fullest. And so in order not to displace millions, we're talking about millions of passport holders. So would that be accurate to say?
Completely agree with you, Your Honor. And thank you very much for that support. Thank you, Your Honor.
No more other questions. I just want to manifest that passporting is a very important component and the most engaging component of DFA. Therefore, the budget there should be restored to the fullest as to answer all those hassle-free engagement of our citizens. Thank you, Vice Chair.
Yeah, follow-up question regarding the passport. 2 million passport will cost around how much?
Right now, sir, based on the 950 figures, based on previous data that we have, we bring in something like 4 billion pesos into the national treasury.
No, what I mean is
on
the budget for printing that passport. And I believe it was cut, right? So in order to process the 2 million passport, what is the cost?
the cost for right now, sir,
For printing?
for printing, sir, no. Sir, can I get back to you on that?
Can you just submit it to the
I will
Business
submit,
Committee?
sir.
Okay, thank you
so I
very
will-
much to our Vice Chair Eric Martinez. Next to interpolate, Representative Rufus Rodriguez.
Uh,
Zoom. You are now recognized.
Thank you very much, Vice Chair Joseph. Good evening to our Secretary Enrique Manalo, the undersecretaries, and the assistant secretaries who are all my friends. Good evening to all of you. First of all, I heard our secretary state that indeed this year is the 6th anniversary of our victory of the arbitration award. May I ask the secretary that on the 6th anniversary, we already abandoned that weak position that our government had for the past 6 years and already proceed. Will the secretary, as head of DFA, be more resolute in forcefully insisting on our victory of the arbitral award?
Mr. Secretary.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In response to the honorable congressman, I will, of course, as I said before, be resolute in implementing our position regarding the arbitral award and our adherence to UNCLOS. In fact, in my first meeting with the Chinese foreign minister, I did raise it with him directly and the arbitral award. And every time we meet, in fact, the other week with other Chinese officials, we always mention it. And I'm really, I'm really committed to seeing how we can maintain that position and at the same time undertake the other aspects of our approach towards this issue, which I mentioned earlier.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. The President, as the chief architect of our Philippine foreign policy, has emphatically stated that never will we abandon even 1 square inch of territory of the Republic of the Philippines to any foreign power like the People's Republic of China. Second question, Mr. Secretary. You stated that precisely if there's any joint development of resources in the West Philippine Sea, it will follow the mandates of the Philippine Constitution. So therefore, Mr. Secretary, do you agree that we cannot contract out our sovereignty? In other words, there can be no joint exploration of our West Philippine Sea resources if there is no recognition by the People's Republic of China of Philippine sovereignty as mandated by the Constitution.
Mr. Secretary.
Thank you. Yes, as far as I am concerned and the DFA is concerned, we will not agree to any or lend our agreement to any contract or whatever or any paper or memorandum of understanding on oil exploration, which is not consistent with the provisions of the Philippine Constitution.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for the very correct answers that you have given to this committee. Thank you very much. Now, my third question. Can now, to save material time, can Yusek Morales here be able to present on screen the final request of the amount of 2,218,367,000. Minuscule. Flash on the screen because we can see that the DFA is very reasonable. The DBM removed 22 billion from their proposal, but they are not asking for 20 billion, Mr. Chairman. They're only asking for 2.2 billion. Can you now put on the screen to save time for my time in the interpellation?
Yes, kindly flash it to the monitor.
Mr. Chair. Sir, can I read while they're flashing it on the screen? Yeah. Mr. Chair, with
Yes, Yusek Morales.
thank you very much, Congressman Rufus Rodriguez and Mr. Chair. Just to save time while we are trying to flash on the screen the summary of our proposals. Our proposal would amount to 2,350,000, which would include increase in our building fund to the tune of 1.389 billion. The e-passport printing in the amount of 544 million. The increase in the salaries of our local hires abroad in the amount of 278 million. The budget for the newly established Office of Civilian Security, 6 million, and our temporary offsite passport services in the various malls at 136 million, for a total of almost 2,400,000,000 pesos, Your Honor. Just to save time while our committee is.
Thank you very much, Yusek Morales.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So since I am not going to intervene anymore in the plenary, as requested by my good friend Benny Abante, therefore, I now would like to make manifest and already move, and this will be carried to the plenary. I move that we restore the total amount of 2.4 billion pesos only to the Department of Foreign Affairs. So move, Mr. Chairman.
Salamat.
Okay.
Duly noted, Representative Rodriguez.
Now, last,
No
Mr.
one wants to second that motion.
That is now the amount at 22.218. That's what I wrote. So all of this,
You will consider during the budget deliberation, Representative Rodriguez.
yes, it is in your hands, Chairman Joseph, to be able to.
I will ask Chairman Saldi.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Are you done, Representative Rodriguez?
I am very short. I have not consumed the time because very short questions. Now, the last, second to the last question. Undersecretary Morales, can you give us what are the special provisions you're asking for?
Anyone from DFA? Yeah, Yusek Morales, you're recognized.
Thank you. Thank you. The special provisions. With your permission, Mr. Chair, special provision 1, Your Honor, is the Department of Foreign Affairs Working Fund. All income collected in foreign service posts, including rental income and proceeds from sale of used motor vehicles, and all other items classified as unserviceable shall be recorded as income of the general fund. That's special provision 1. Special provision 3 is that the amount of. I proceed, Your Honor.
We are still on number 2.
May I also point out that these special provisions that were scrapped in the 2023 NEP but should remain, the DFA is authorized to pay advance rentals of chanceries, consular offices, and official residences abroad, covering a period not exceeding 5 years, and to make minor renovations in the said properties to make them suitable for the department's use as the circumstances and the practice of the country may require. The lease agreement shall be subject to the rules on advance payment of rentals and the appropriate use of living quarters. Your Honors, when we rent properties abroad, we are subject to the laws of the host country. Even if we are an embassy, this is a commercial transaction. So we have to comply with the laws of the host country. Sometimes their lease period are more than 1 year. This period is more than 1 year, up to 5 years. And we are now proposing the inclusion of this. Another special provision is the tax refund of foreign service posts. Notwithstanding any provision of law to the contrary, the Secretary of Foreign Affairs is hereby authorized to use the proceeds of tax refunds due to foreign service posts to cover payment of other operating expenses of the said foreign post. Under the Vienna Convention, we are the diplomatic missions may be entitled to certain exemptions from taxation. And in case they pay in advance, these are refunded. And we are proposing that the secretary be authorized to utilize the proceeds of these tax refunds. We also have a special provision on the appropriations authorized for the hiring of alien or locally hired employees may be used for payment of gratuity or separation pay to said employees in the foreign service in accordance with local laws. This may include terminal leave and employer share in social security or workmen's compensation customary in the diplomatic or consular jurisdiction. Another special provision, Your Honors, is the long-term lease of motor vehicles. Since we propose that foreign service posts be authorized to lease motor vehicles for a period not to exceed 3 years, with the option to renew thereafter if the lease proves to be economically advantageous to the government. These are among the special provisions that we are proposing to be included, Your Honors.
Mr. Chairman,
Thank you, Sec Morales.
Mr. Chairman,
Representative Rodriguez.
I move that we accept and approve all the special provisions because this is for the good of the DFA and therefore good for our country. So move, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, Representative Rodriguez, we will consider all those provisions in the proper time.
Thank you. Now I proceed, Mr. Chairman. To
Very much, Representative Rodriguez.
yes, just to thank therefore the Department of Foreign Affairs. My request for repatriation has always been acted by the DFA. And you know, this our Filipinos, especially from Cagayan de Oro, in crisis situation in foreign lands, have been able to come back. And we thank our DFA for that. And we would like to therefore express the gratitude of the city of Cagayan de Oro for the repatriation. Second, we thank the DFA for passport appointments, facilitating because there are travels where there are sick relatives abroad and we are able to ask for passport facilitation. And so with that, including the fact that they have not asked for additional assistance to National's Fund of 1 billion because it seems that it's okay. And also the 200 million legal assistance, Mr. Chairman, I therefore would like to manifest my support not only to the budget presented by the NEP, but also the increase of the 2.4 billion that is requested to augment the budget of the DFA and to approve all the special provisions. With that, Mr. Chairman, I thank you for the time given to this representation, especially also to Chairman Stella Kimbo. Thank you very much, Chairman Joseph. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Representative Rodriguez.
Mr. Chair, we request Secretary Manalo to please formally transmit the proposed amendments on the special provision to the Committee on Appropriations so they can be taken up at the proper time. Thank you.
Okay, we'll go to the last interpolator, Representative Jojo Ang.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Mr. Vice Chair, and to Secretary Manalo at saka sa lahat ng DFA family. Good evening. Yung tanong ko is nasagot na, no? The same sa kay Congressman Martinez regarding sa yung mga kabayan ko doon sa Ilonggo region. I'm representing the Uswag Ilonggo Party, no? Regional party. Yung concern ng mga Ilonggo doon, yung ano daw, yung pagkuha ng appointment siyadong matagal. At saka yung isa, pag nakakuha na sila ng appointment, yung pag-release ng passport nila daw, minsan umaabot ng 10, 12 or 14 days. Kaya baka po pwedeng magawan natin ng solusyon na baka ma-shorten natin, no? Oo. And gusto ko sanang malaman kung ilan yung mobile off-site na mobile passport center natin in Western Visayas. Ilan?
Anyone from the DFA family? Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mayong gabi, sir. Kasiman, Maman Galit.
Oh,
Taga Carlos ko ba?
okay.
Gigantes, taga
Okay.
Gigantes ko. Mayong gabi, sir.
Mayong gabi ingit, ha?
Okay, Carlos.
Carles.
Sir, first to the question, how many mobile passport? At the moment, because we just started the mobile passport system this year, and it was intended to reinforce the temporary offsite and the consular offices. So it's just gaining momentum. So on the average, we're just making 10 mobile passports in a month. This is because of so many factors.
Okay.
And as a matter of principle, sir, Your Honor, we do mobile passport in areas where there are no consular offices. Parang
Okay,
ito yung
yeah,
supplement.
naintindihan ko. Okay.
But with respect doon naman po sa mga kasimanwa naton sa Iloilo, akong tanawan, I will look into it, sir, and see how we can address that.
Yes, please.
But the 7 days to 12 days, that's the normal naman po. But if they are on an emergency, we make those exceptions to make it shorter. Except
Okay.
that we will have no resources to make the exception the general rule kasi kulang po talaga na tao. Pero kung gusto rin po lang expedite, 7 days pwede naman po.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
Please na lang.
Salamat. Good
Tulungan natin yung mga kababayan natin.
Sige po.
Not only in Iloilo, no, but Western Visayas.
Yes, sir.
Ilonggo region. Yeah.
Yes, sir. In fact, we'll
Yeah, please.
do this so that we'll not be accused of arbitrariness and favoritism. We'll do this to every
Sa
region.
lahat. Yeah.
But given your representation, we'll definitely give it a very deep look, Your
Please.
Honor. Thank you. Salamat,
Okay.
good kaayo.
Salamat, good.
Yes, Yusek De Vega.
Mayong gabi. Because one thing we also have to put in perspective, example, I was the ambassador in Brussels. In some European countries, it takes for 2 months for a citizen to get a passport. But dahil sa ating ASEC, kaya much faster. Secondly po, now the passport, as you may know, is 10-year validity. Dati 5 years. Now it's 10 years. So that's another service.
Okay. Salamat.
Okay, thank you very much, Yusek De Vega.
Yung renewal yung meaning namin, hindi yung pag-apply. Nung mag-renew sila, di ba, kuha ng appointment, tapos mag-release yung passport nila, yun. Medyo dugay-gid ko, no? Sige.
Your Honor, just to answer.
Yes,
In
please.
fact, dahil yung passport renewal lang, what we have done, hindi nyo na kailangan pumunta sa CO or consular pag merong temporary offsite para mas mabilis talaga sa temporary offsite. Thank
Sige.
you.
Salamat.
Salamat.
Okay. Ipaabot ko sa mga kababayan natin na mga
Malipahin ng gabi, sir.
yes, malipay. Sige.
That's it.
Yun lang naman, wala namang
Okay, thank you very much, Congressman
Ambassador.
Jojo Ang. Before we terminate our budget briefing, I have a letter here from the First District of Bohol from Representative Edgar Chato, which was received by the Department of Foreign Affairs last August 16, addressed to Secretary Enrique Manalo about he wants to follow up his resolution last Congress, resolution number 255, resolution urging the Department of Foreign Affairs to establish a consular office in the city of Tagbilaran, province of Bohol. And it was adopted and approved in the last Congress. And he's hoping that the DFA will take action into this in the near future. And I think you have a copy, so I'll just give this to the committee ComSec for their proper documentation. Okay, and lastly,
No, not yet. You turn it over to me.
Okay.
I have a couple of.
Okay.
I have a couple of.
Madam Chair, I'm turning the floor to you.
All right. Salamat, Mr. Chair. This morning, the DOT requested for an increase in their budget of about 7 billion, and you are asking for about a 2 billion increase. We expect every single agency to ask the same. And as you know, by the Constitution, the budget ceiling cannot be changed. So kung magdadagdag tayo ng budget ninyo, magbabawas tayo sa iba. And of course, no agency would want to give up any peso. So this is the tough task ahead of the Committee on Appropriations. So just one very simple question. What explains your relatively low utilization rates? So as of 2022, June 30, obligation rate is about 61%. Particularly for capital outlay, it's only about 29%. So of course, this is something that the DBM obviously considers in assessing proposals. We will obviously have to take that into consideration as well. So just a quick explanation of why that is so. And also we note that in 2021, you had savings of about 437 million. At this point in time, have you declared savings for 2022?
Yes, Yusek Morales.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair and Honorable Vice Chair. We have low budget utilization in terms of capital outlay, but in terms of MOE, it's not the case, and personal services. This may be attributed to the allocation for the redevelopment of the DFA building and the decision of our, I do not want to point it out, but our former secretary has during his time decided to demolish and build, but the budget we asked for was insufficient. It was only for retrofitting. And so therefore, during his term, he insisted that it should be demolished and built. So we were unable to use the budget. And during the time of the COVID, Madam Chair, he said that we will not spend any money for the redevelopment of the building. But the building is in a sorry state. Still, we had to defer to his wishes. This may explain the low utilization of capital outlay.
All right, so maybe just submit in writing whatever plans you have for expediting or having a better system of fund absorption. And I also want to note that special provision number 2 in the NEP 2023 pertains to the passport revolving fund, which actually allows you to augment whatever budget you have for the purchase of passport booklets. So kung kulang ang pondo para sa passports, special provision number 2 allows you to dip into your revolving fund. So the question is, what is the balance of this fund?
Oh, thank you, if I may.
Because that's a second item in your tier 2 proposal.
That is correct, Madam Chair. Our passport revolving fund is used for the improvement of passport and consular services and other department services. Our current balance is 582,660,383. We are using this to improve our consular services and other department services and to pay for our contractuals and also to allow us to pay for the passport booklets. But even this would not be enough to pay for our arrears in passport booklets to over 1 billion. And if we use it all to pay for those passport booklet printing, we will be left with little funds for our other services, including payment of contractuals. So we're asking for a separate budget for that. But during the time of Secretary Locsin also, he authorized the payment of part of the passport revolving fund to the APO printing for the passport booklets. But it has gone down to very low levels during the pandemic. It's now only beginning to grow again. But still, it won't be sufficient to cover our arrears with the APO on the printing of booklets, Madam.
All right,
Chair.
thank you for that. There is also another request from Representative Agabas, which I cannot find, and I will just here. This is for the 6th District of Pangasinan. This is the request of Representative Marlene Agabas to establish a consular office to cater to the eastern portion of Pangasinan, either in Tayug or Rosales, Pangasinan. So, Secretary, could you kindly take note of this and study the request of Representative Agabas, and kindly just respond to her through a submission to the Committee on Appropriations. Right, and at this point, we would like to request some closing remarks from our esteemed colleague who is also a member of the DFA family, as his father was a DFA secretary from 2004 to 2011. Representative Roman Romulo, you're recognized.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First of all, I was here right after Yusek Morales gave the outline for what is expected from the DFA next year. And I'm happy to note, Madam Vice, that everyone who I heard speaking or clarifying with the DFA, including with the minority, seems to be in full support of the budget and augmentation of the budget of the DFA. And I believe this is because of the respect that the members of Congress have for the men and women of the DFA, especially in particular, Madam Chair, to the competence and integrity of our new Secretary Enrique Manalo. Congratulations to the DFA. Make us continually proud of being Filipinos.
All right, on that note, do we hear a motion from Vice Chair Bialago?
Madam Chair, I move that we terminate the budget briefing of the Department of Foreign Affairs. So move, Madam Chair.
Second.
Motion is approved. Do we hear another motion?
It has moved and seconded the sorry, this chair. Sorry, Madam Chair. Okay. Here.
Second line.
Madam Chair, may I move that we suspend our deliberation and resume tomorrow, Thursday, September 1 at 9 a.m. So move.
Second. Right. Motion is carried. Session suspended.